Okay.
All right, this is Pete Morris. We're doing the ComancheZOOM on December 17th. And just for those who are looking at the video only, this is the topic for tonight. Oops, one more slide. Here we go. Icing, winter flying, and survival. And actually tonight it's for me, very appropriate because I'm sitting here in Danielson, Connecticut. It is 19 degrees and going south of that, will have 1 foot of snow and nobody is flying. So this is going to be very appropriate for me tonight. What we're also doing tonight is a real quick introduction of a program that we're coming up with called the Safety Spotlight. As you can see, we've got a bunch of things where we have tried to get people to tell us about different kinds of things and give us a list of stuff. What I'm going to show you tonight is this one, just for the heck of it. Get the real weather. This is what it goes by. And there you have it. It's basically about a minute or a little longer going through 5 or 6 different screens. We're planning next week, since it's Christmas Eve, to have just an open mic for anybody that wants to join in. And I'm going to go through all of the ones we have for the Safety Spotlight, just to get people a chance to take a look at it and comment on it. We're also going to be looking at a few other things that we're working on to embellish our ComancheZOOMs. So with that, we'll go back. You all now have permission to unmute yourself and do the old who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
I'm Ray Fay from Madison, Wisconsin. I fly a 260B model. And when it's a little nicer weather.
Welcome, Ray. Welcome back, Ray.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good group of guys and a good program.
Terrific.
Hi everyone, I'm Adam Height. I have Comanche 400 N8502 Papa, and the reason I'm not flying at the moment is because of my Prime Minister rather than because of any sort of weather.
You need to get it fixed, Adam. Jeez.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting out to the US and getting started, but I mean, there's another ban of general aviation coming to Britain.
You can come to Kansas and come fly the 400 with me. I'm Stephen Osborne and I fly a Comanche 400 and I'm in the process of rebuilding a Turbo 400.
Okay, anybody else? Just like ATC, key the mic, who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
Well, I guess being I think it was Ray said it's a good bunch of guys. The girl will jump in here, and I'm Jenny Muller from Cody, Nebraska, and I've got a PA-30C model.
And Jenny, I'm going to just interrupt right now and say I apologize for not mentioning the girls.
That's no problem. We'll fly with the guys any day.
All right, I'm sorry.
I'm Aaron Landis from Redding, California. I fly a 1964 260 model, 8556 Papa.
I'm Jason Rosbeck. I'm in Denver, Colorado at a Front Range Airport, now called the Colorado Air and Spaceport, and I fly a 250 69 or 51 Papa.
Rich Bergman, El Cajon, California, 260 Bravo, 9242 Papa. It's a little chilly here, but not like you guys got up northeast. And I'm glad I'm in Southern California.
I am Lonnie, fly a 1960 180. And this is a picture of our grandson, Evan. My nickname for him is Piper Buddy. Here he's less than 2 months old. And this was in September, so there's no way our daughter was going to fly him to Boston to see his 93-year-old grandmother. We don't know how long she's going to be around. So because of general aviation, Evan was able to meet his grandmother. And that's the power of the privilege of what we have.
That's terrific.
I'm Aton. I have a PA-30A model. It's currently in pieces in Colorado. I myself am based in the Wichita area in Kansas. I'm at home in San Francisco right now, but
it will have an immediate impact in protecting the health of people who are
Jim Brown, presently in Yuma, Arizona, from Calgary, Alberta, 65-260.
So again, this is a specific kind of rapid testing and only for
I see Ray Fay.
Somebody's got an open mic with a discussion in the background.
Hey Ray, you've got an open mic, so pop in and then mute yourself.
No, mine shut. I can't hear anything where I'm sitting.
Alberta's top doctors reiterating
Oh, okay.
today that we must
I'll
celebrate
turn it off
Christmas
anyway,
differently this year. Dr. Dina Hinshaw says holiday gatherings.
Nope, if it's quiet where you are, it's a different stuff. Yep, that worked. I'm CJ, currently from Vermont, where we've got about a foot of snow on the ground. Fly a 180 and a 260B.
Hi, from Fort Worth, Texas. This is Pat Kiefer. I fly a 1970 PA 39 and even got to fly it today. Hooray.
Well, welcome, Pat, and we're hoping you will come and talk to us at some point about the race you and your mother, Mary and Jane, will won around the world.
Oh gosh, be careful what you ask for.
We are well aware. We're looking forward to hearing from it. If we can get you and Charlie and Melody here to talk about air racing and Comanches, that'll be quite the day. But I think your story will fill the time.
Thank you, CJ.
I'm Margie Leggett, and I fly a PA-24 out of Tri-Cities, Washington.
Margie, welcome and great to hear from you.
Thank you.
I was going to try to reach you earlier and my day got a little bit crazy, but because you're one of the fast team reps that comes, and this is clearly a normally an appropriate topic, we reached out to Rob Leonard. He was unable to come. We're not sure retroactive is possible, but if it is, would you be willing to help us to be our fast team rep on the ComancheZOOM?
Sure, if I can.
Thank you. Welcome again.
Thank you.
Well, and on the basis of that, then we can probably see what we can do about doing wings credit. And oops, there we go. If there was wings credit available, this is how you get it. You need to register on northeastcomanche.org. At the top of the ComancheZOOM page, there is a link for the registration form. Fill out that form with your name, phone number, and email. Anything else on there is optional, but you're welcome to fill those out too. Send it in and I will get it. And we will compile a list that we send to the FAA to get the credit. Simple as that. The key
And
is,
just a quick note to augment what Pete said, about going to northeastcomanche.org, and you'll see across the top, just under a blue section, a link you can click on that says ComancheZOOM. And then as Pete said, near the top of that, there's something called registration form that you can click on. And then Pete will, and Robert Klein will see about getting wings credit for you. Wings credit is valuable because these constitute part of the ground instruction requirement, and with 3 ground instruction segments of the right sort, and as little as 1 flying segment with an instructor, although we encourage you to do more, obviously, you can actually use that to complete a BFR, which can be both cost efficient, and if you are concerned about trying to minimize your exposure and not have to spend too much of your time flying with somebody else and everybody trying to talk to ATC with a mask, that can be a really great way to accomplish that.
You know, if anybody needs this information, I can put it back up at any time.
Maybe paste it into the chat window, Pete.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do that.
I can do that. All right. And everybody just please jump in, as Pete said, to any quiet spot and say who you are, where you are, and what you fly. And I'll go paste into the chat window.
We've got another 15 minutes before we get down and dirty with the topic of the night.
Hi guys, Ed Cullen with you, joining you from South Lake, Texas, Comanche 250. Looking forward to tonight.
Sorry, Brad Hewlett, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, PA 24250.
Mike Newman, Butler, Pennsylvania, 1959 Comanche 250.
Good evening, James Coleman from Harbor Springs, Michigan. I have a 1965 PA 24 400.
That's 3 400s on tonight.
Steve Shepard here from Morgantown, West Virginia, with a 63 250.
Ernie James in Yucca Valley, California by Palm Springs with a 65 260 8648 Papa. And I am going to fly in this weekend. Havasu.
Cool. Let us know how it works out.
I'm Bill Kniff, New Bern, North Carolina, 260C, 1969. It looks like it's getting back in the air again.
Yeehaw.
Bill, how is your airplane doing?
The insurance people are finally coming around to my way of thinking.
Aha. Okay, that answers a lot of questions.
You got that right, Pete.
Speaking of insurance companies, Will Carpenter, who some of you know from his adventure with an engine having a catastrophic failure in flight, has agreed to come and talk to us about his experience of both managing a surprisingly non-destructive forced landing in a field, despite coming nose to nose with a fence, and then his subsequent adventures in working with his insurance company to rebuild the airplane. So should be an interesting one. And everybody, I'm back for posting how to potentially get wings credit.
We'll have to go together. If I'm gonna go today. Yeah, okay. Great. Goodbye.
Hello, is this working?
It is.
Loud and clear.
Can you see me? I'm not, this first time on here, so I don't know how I'm
Yep,
on the screen.
Ever welcome. You look great, actually.
All
Thanks
right,
for
nice
being
to
here.
meet you, buddy. I'm Ed Pankowski. I'm on Long Island, Manorville, New York. And I have a A24260C. Had it almost 30 years. 9313 Papa.
Did you say 9313?
9313. That's correct.
We had 9322 Pop, 260C, and John Futter, who I believe will be here later tonight, has 9317 Pop,
Oh, that's
260C.
nice. That's very close to mine.
Wait, exactly. Welcome and thanks for being here. Glad you made it on.
All right, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Hi, it's Chris
And
out
everybody-
here, just outside Toronto. Have a 180 Comanche. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me because I'm now doing this on my iMac computer, so I'm not sure if it's working right.
Chris, you look fabulous. We hear you loud and clear. And can you tell us how Dave is?
Dave's good. Dave is, like he said, he's the luckiest guy around now because he's a survivor of COVID.
Perfect.
But yeah, he's good.
Well,
But,
welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
Some of you heard Chris and Dave speak about their trip flying Chris's freshly rebuilt stock 180 1.5 times around the world and then back across the pond just for good measure. So we're both delighted to have you and very happy to hear that Dave's on the mend.
Good, thank you.
Hey, CJ, this is Robert. How much snow you got up there?
A foot. Don't talk to me about snow. I'm still in denial.
Here at Danielson, like I was saying, we've got 19 degrees and going south of that and about a foot of snow, lightweight stuff, but it's still a foot.
Yeah, this is a timely topic.
It's not fair to the Coloradans.
Yeah. And Steve, have you already jumped in?
We're totally dry out here. It's just man-made, so I'll trade you that foot of snow.
Come on east. We've got Pete and I both have spare bedrooms, and we'll put up any Comanche pilots on the couches and the spares, and if you really want it, in the barn.
All right.
Andy, if you're able to unmute and talk, please introduce yourself. Good to see your message.
I think this is working, yes?
Yep.
Loud and clear.
Andy Davey, I have a PA 24 180 1962 vintage, and it's tucked away in my hangar at Sullivan County Airport, Mike Sierra Victor.
Andy, not only are you loud and clear, you look great. Welcome.
I got the PET scan results about an hour ago, and everything's good.
Great.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thanks.
And welcome back.
Hey, CJ, Brad here in Saskatchewan, Canada. Just talking about weather. We don't get a lot of snow, but it's going down to minus 28 Celsius tomorrow.
Ooh, that's painful. Well, we've got minus 11 as of early this morning, and it's supposed to get worse tonight. So I'll see you and raise you 1. That's Fahrenheit. Sorry, I'll see you and lower you 15. Well, welcome here. And based on just everybody, this ComancheZOOM in particular was it came out of several things. Zach Grant said, you really need to do one on winter flying. And then on the Facebook page, another person said, we should do one on winter flying. But in the meanwhile, we had done the ComancheZOOM on American Thanksgiving that was just open mic night. And we had few Americans and many Canadians. And of course, the subject turned to winter flying, and nobody knows winter flying like Canadians. And there were, I think 5 or 6 from Canada, from all over up north and on the east and west coasts. And so we learned a lot, and we're hoping that y'all will, if y'all see Tem H's message, it's really cold there. Anyways, we hope y'all will be jumping into this lot because y'all have so much just real hard personal experience.
Even Claxton, Georgia is going to see below 0 Celsius temperatures overnight.
Oh man.
Just
not
peachy.
Nice.
That's just peachy.
It's not, that's not bad. That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, Pete, that was a bad Georgia peach pun. I caught that one. And George, welcome. You wanna say hello and introduce yourself?
I'm George. I'm from southeast Georgia, and I have a 260. And I've seen ice. I know what it looks like. And as far as I'm concerned, there's only one good rule about ice. Don't have any is perfect.
And George, the next time we're negotiating group buys for magnetos, Surefly or Electro Air, we'll definitely be keeping you in the loop.
Thank you.
I don't think I checked in with anybody.
Well, Rob, welcome.
Hello.
Check in.
Hi, I'm Rob Whiteley. I have a 1967 PA-30T, and I fly out of Concord in Northern California. And we dropped all the way down to 50 degrees last night.
Wow.
My heart beats for you.
Or you, 50 degrees.
Welcome, Rob. Thanks for joining us. Even if we're all jealous of your 50 degrees.
Scott Swanson's here, Pensacola, Florida, and I had to put on long.
That was cruel, and welcome.
Hey, Pete, it's Zach. Check your chat box.
Zach, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Did Pete get that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can do it. The problem is I'm recording, which means I have to get out of Zoom to get that stuff.
Ah, okay. All right, thanks.
You, if you want to share at any point, I mean, share is available.
And Zach, I'll text you his cell phone number.
Well, I just had some pictures that I was trying to get put up, and I'm in now and trying to figure out how to bring it up. I'm having not so much luck.
Well, if you're going to share, there's a share button on the bottom of the screen. Click
Yeah,
that.
it's on a different device.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Zach, have you the ability to email them to Pete?
I can't get that email while I'm on Zoom.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Right. Yep. Do you have the ability to email them to anybody if I emailed you with a reply? Something you reply to?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, good. I'll send you an email.
All right.
And everybody jump into any quiet spot. I saw Cecil come for a moment and I wanted Cecil to come in and introduce himself.
I'm going to play with the share screen one more time just to do our sales pitch. Particularly this particular one right here. This guy has an amazing history, being a flight instructor, long-time flight instructor, and a D-Day veteran. He dropped in by parachute 4 miles behind the enemy lines at Utah Beach. And the picture on the right there is, I believe, his 94th birthday, something like that. Robert Klein can correct me on that. But
96th birthday.
96, yep. In honor of that, he decided to take one more jump.
And Norwood had a stroke and he's not been able to see people. He was actually wasn't my principal flight instructor for the private, but he helped me enormously for the commercial certificate as well as just growing up in the Army. I basically adopted him as dad. And because of all of this Corona and other things, I haven't been able to see him in over a year. So if y'all can find it in your hearts to go out and get a get well card, there's the address on where to send it to. I just think being a D-Day veteran and a veteran general, we should give him some recognition and wish him a speedy recovery.
Sent him a Christmas card today.
Here's the rest of the sales pitch. I'll go through real quick. We have the Get Acquainted program that's been going on, that Bill Kniff is doing. Piper Museum is, I guess, still doing okay, but they could still use some help. The swap meet stuff has been going on pretty good. We got about 9 or 10 different things that people want to either find or get or sell. And Les Thomas is sort of coordinating that. This is what we're doing this week. Again, if it wasn't FAA, assuming we may be able to get wings credit, this is how you do it. The swap meeting, as I said, you send them to les.thomas@gmail. And then Comanche Docs Online, that is growing and growing and growing. It's pretty cool. If we try to do some fundraising, we have some stuff that you could probably support. Here are some suggestions for what money might be used to help us with. It costs us to have Zoom. And then we're trying to set up some techniques to do things like welding and machining for Comanches and working on the owner-produced parts. The 337 idea is because once there is a 337 existing, you can add your tail number to it. You don't have to go out and get a new one necessarily. And that's something you got to check on. But and then the Aviation Museum could use some help. Okay, end of sales pitch. We got a couple more minutes until we open the floodgates on winter flying.
Can I just
Hello,
check
everyone.
that everyone can?
Hans calling just to start checking in to say hello. Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
Hans.
Hello.
Hey, welcome, Hans. Thanks for making it in.
You're
Good to see your face.
DJ.
And Hans, by the way, just because we have a couple of Earth Rounders here on the call, including Pat Kiefer and Chris Elgar, is the proud new owner of a 260B that flew around the world with Alex Sawaski. So welcome, Hans.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm still
that airplane.
Getting familiar with that 260, but I'm really excited about flying that, especially cross country.
Hi, CJ. Hi, everybody. It's John Grichke.
Of the Red Rocket fame. So for anybody who was looking at Sun and Fun Radio.
Instead of fame.
2020's most famous Comanche.
Right. Well, for those of you who are interested, Sun and Fun did an interview of ComancheTown, and that amazing red Comanche prominently featured in the backdrop is exactly John's airplane there.
Who was it they interviewed, CJ?
It was supposed to be everybody, and the entire group went from the GA town hall meeting off to support the vendors, and that left only a few people available, which was me.
Except for the owner of the airplane, who was dutifully in his hotel room working.
Well, dang, timing is everything, Mr. Kitchen.
I know.
Anyways, your bird was a superb substitute and did a great job representing the type. Anyways, jump in, everybody, who you are, where you are, and what you.
Speaking of ComancheTown, Lauren and I were the last plane standing. You guys are early birds. We got out there where there was nobody. We got there like 11. I thought that was early.
Yeah, why is everyone rushed to leave?
Okay, according to my clock here, it's 7:30 Eastern time. So I know Keil is on the Zoom now, and I'm not sure who else is that Oh, yeah, Zach is also on. So maybe what I can do is share the hit list. This list is the composite one. It's the one that CJ put out that I emailed to everybody with the last invitation. And the red stuff is the stuff that Zach commented on because he was not gonna be here. So here we have it. Who's gonna start?
I'm going to just run through sort of the major areas here and then let the presenters comment. And I'm just texting Kristin Winter. I know she's been slammed and was planning to swoop in just as we got started, which is now. And just text her the link and then we'll get started. Sorry about this, guys. But so this ComancheZOOM came about, as mentioned, through a suggestion by Zach initially that probably doing a ComancheZOOM on winter flying might not be such a bad idea. Went to, and then the Piper Comanche Facebook group, somebody independently said, hey, we should do this as a topic at the Thanksgiving Zoom, which was really just an open mic night. We did it in case other people were unable to join, or rather to be with other people on Thanksgiving, and discovered that no, Americans weren't doing anything on Thanksgiving, but Canadians who have a different Thanksgiving day certainly were. And we ended up with half a dozen Canadians. And of course, who knows more about flying in the winter than Canadians? So we had this amazing discussion about winter flying techniques. And here we are with some people who have incredible amounts of time flying. So Ron Keil is here, and Ron has about 5,500 hours in Comanches. Is that right, Ron?
Yeah, that's about right for Comanches.
Yeah,
Not,
but
not
mainly,
8,000.
but right, yeah, sorry, I did fix it later. And flies out of the Great Lakes area, which is probably one of the key parts of the country for both winter conditions and icing because of the amount of water the Great Lakes carries. Zach, having grown up flying since he was small with his father out of another key wintry area of the country, and owning 3 Comanches and sort of teaching and maintaining and et cetera, is another expert. Kristin Winter ran Part 135 operations out of Alaska and flew her twin Comanche up there, and has been a freight dog and another ANPIA, CFII, et cetera. So, and then I'm hoping Wayne made it in because, and if not, he'll be back to talk survival. But, and we have a couple of Canadians here with us. So this is really just a chance to roundtable with some experts, but then everybody who's here should feel free to jump in and add hopefully briefly, your own experiences. We figure we would just go through pre-flight on through cruise and landing. So just to start with, going around the round table, what weather appropriate survival gear do you tend to carry for winter flying? Starting with Ron.
Okay, well, I think we listed some of it. I do either wear or carry warm clothes, and we have snowmobile suits that we will throw in. The theory being, if you have to make a forced landing, how would you dress? And if it's below 0, you want to make sure that you can keep warm. We always carry blankets in the plane, which also help. And we bring along equipment that allow us to start fires, and we bring plenty of water.
Okay.
Now we also, because both Betty and I fly for the Coast Guard Auxiliary, we have survival equipment that they've provided us in the life vests, which include EPIRBs, flares, streamers, and even we also carry an extra handheld navcom, so that we could talk to somebody up above if we had to.
Zach, let's put you on the spot.
There we go. Somehow I went, it went away from being spacebar on. Anyway, yeah, one of the things that I think you need to separate on some of this conversation is, the actual winter flying concerns with the aircraft, and then the physiological concerns, as Ron mentioned. Obviously, if you're flying in very, very sparsely populated areas, it's even more important to think survival kits. Long term, what do you need to survive? And it's different than a summertime kit where what do you have that's available? In the summertime, you're trying to stay cool and stay out of the sun. In the wintertime, you're trying to stay warm. That's the biggest hazard. But when we're looking at that, that's almost ancillary. Hopefully, if you get to getting in the airplane and getting it started and going flying, hopefully, you've thought through some of that stuff. But I'd like to touch more on some of the things that you have to do to make sure that the airplane is good to go. So you don't end up in a field with needing that kind of stuff. And some of the things that we talked about is the ways that you can prepare your airplane to be more reliable in the wintertime. Obviously, if you have a nice heated hangar, when you pull it out, it's all nice and warm and ready to go. But most people don't, and especially if it's been sitting outside overnight with precipitation, and you're going to have, depending on how cold it is, if it's extremely cold, you're probably better off than if it's right around freezing, where you might have had some melting and then refreezing on the surfaces of the aircraft, things along those lines. It's easy to preheat the engine, whether you have a plug-in type or a forced hot air preheater. And in most of the areas around in the cold areas, those are available. Usually FBOs have them. If you have an unheated hangar, it's as simple as a blanket and an easy heat oil pan heater. Obviously, if you're going to be in somewhere where in the Great White North, for our friends from the north there, you need more amperage to heat things up. But most people down here, when the average is 0 degrees or so Fahrenheit, you can get away with an oil pan heater and a blanket. That's the easy part. Heating the cabin, I cringe on sometimes when I see what people do, leave a heater plugged in their cabin overnight. I know several people who've lost airplanes, and I know several other people who lost their airplanes too when the entire T hangar row burned down because of that. I don't really like seeing that, but just something to think about. But if you do have gyros, if you do have even electronics with screens, especially LCD screens, you really need to get them up to somewhere near freezing before they're gonna work real well. So that is important to warm the interior of the airplane up as well. And I know that wasn't on any of the notes, but I thought it might be something that would be good to talk about. Additionally, if you know, a broom is your best friend to get most of the stuff off the wings. And one thing that I carry a garden sprayer, just a pump up type garden sprayer, you know, couple of gallons of antifreeze, and you just you mix up 50-50 with hot water in the FBO, and go right out and spray the wings. If you can't come up with hot water, just use regular water. Put the garden sprayer down in front of the heater output of your car, and let it warm up for a while, and that'll, you know, help melt some of the stuff. But you don't want to use hot water straight. You definitely don't want to use windshield washer fluid, because once the alcohol evaporates, you have run back and it refreezes. It's just water. So those are things to think about as far as that. So I don't know. Anybody else want to talk about pre-flight stuff?
Email or Zoom?
That's an invitation to jump in with your experiences and suggestions.
I might add,
You've got 5 minutes to do that.
Speakers are, they're over here.
Yes, yes.
Have a good ELT. It's better to be found than be surviving in the cold.
Good one.
A good new ELT. Better they find you quick than survive in the cold for a long time.
To build on what Zach said, what we used to do up in Alaska is we used the garden sprayer technique too, but we had these immersion heaters you can get. That's basically just a long hot tube that you stick in the top of the garden sprayer, plug it in about 20 minutes, you get up to about 180 degrees. And you know, if you've got any significant accumulation, that extra heat's very, very helpful. And that's a cheap thing you can keep in your hangar. And, you know, once you or, you know, plug it in the hotel, or just, you know, or at the FBO, and sit and have a cup of coffee for 15 or 20 minutes, and you'll have you'll have a pretty hot de-icing mixture.
Welcome, Kristin, and thank you. Just to confirm, you take your immersion heater and do you put it into the 50-50 mixture?
Yeah.
Perfect. And while we've got you, did you have people carry any particular winter survival gear, just in case?
No, not really. You know, I mean,
focus on prevention rather than cure.
Well, yeah, we carried a spare engine.
Spare engine.
Does anybody pour in
the one on the other
a quart of hot oil?
I don't think a quart of hot oil would do much in that huge heat sink that is the engine. Frankly, never tried it, but
I've been doing it for 20 years. I don't know whether I'm doing any good or not.
Well,
I always carried a quart from home.
I'm sure it doesn't hurt.
If anybody's interested, I just recently had a full Tannis system installed, and I'm really, really happy with it. It works really well. I mean, it gets the cylinders probably 150 degrees in about 4 hours.
We have one in our too. The problem that I've had is trying to get it turned on safely remotely. Does anyone have any good solutions for that?
Yeah, so I'll just jump in on that. I mean, I'm lucky. I have my hangar mates and I went in on a cellular Wi-Fi, and we use it for our cameras as well. And I got these little Wi-Fi switches for $10, and I turn it on with my phone. I can turn it on and have it on a timer, or I can set a time for it to turn on and then a time for it to turn off. It's awesome. $10 on Amazon. I got one for my cabin heater, one for my engine heater.
Okay. Yeah, we have the same problem with cellular, so I'll have to get an antenna on the roof of the county T hangar.
Just a note, if you're using electric heaters in your cabin, make sure you use one with a thermostat. You don't want it to keep going. You want the thermostat to cut in and out.
I'll help him with a question.
I'm gonna second Zach's point. A local twin Comanche that out in California, burned down the entire airplane, keeping a heater in the cabin. That's, it seems to me that if it's a little bit of a forced air thing, aiming it up under the panel, 15 minutes should do the job.
Yeah, so just to clarify on the cabin heater, it is a Tannis cabin heater, so it does have some protections on that, but I only run it about 2 hours before I get out there. And I actually spent an hour in the cabin with it running just to see how hot it got. It really doesn't get that hot, but again, that's a Tannis specific cabin heater. So
Can I hop in with a quick question about cold weather flying? Obviously, we're taught a lot about how to identify a field for a forced landing based on a, shade or roughness. Obviously, when it snows, all fields look white. So how do you then approach that for a forced landing situation to pick the best field when all you've got is white, white, and white?
Well, if it's an airport you're landing at, you should be able to either through the radio or your phone get a hold of an airport manager or somebody that's guarding the radio at the airport and ask them, is that a dusting or is that 3 feet of snow? If you're talking about off-field landing, then I defer to Kristin or Zach for that.
Well, if it's all white and it looks flat, it's probably a landing spot.
All right, thank you.
If I may step in for just a second, up in New Jersey, we had a lot of fields that had grass next to the runway. And if you look, if it snows just a couple of inches, there will in fact be a slight difference in height between the snow over the runway and that over the grass. And that would point to a straight line, maybe 20 to 40 feet wide. So that could give you an idea where the runway is. And two other things. When my Comanche was parked outside, I had easy access to the battery. So if I knew when I was going to go flying, I would take the battery home a couple of days ahead of time so that the temperature of the battery would be 65 degrees, even though it might be 0 outside. So that when I went to engage the ignition, the battery was operating at full power instead of the fraction of a power from colder. And then the other thing is there's an engine heater. I haven't heard that mentioned. So when I get out to the hangar, as soon as I unlock the door, the first thing I do is I go plug in the engine heater. And by the time you load all your luggage and do your pre-flights and call weather and all that other stuff, it'll give the oil a chance to warm up. And if you pull it through once or twice after the engine's been warmed up and then go in prime, it makes it a whole lot easier on the battery to kick it over.
I would add one thing about, I've forgotten who it was that asked about landing on a white space. Having learned to fly in Chicago at a small airport, while the runway was always plowed appropriately, the taxiways didn't always have enough clearance for a twin engine aircraft with both propellers running. as well as didn't always have enough clearance for a Comanche wing. So something to watch for those people who've had a lot of snow lately.
Yeah, that's something. That's something that is very, very important to remember with the Comanches, because we have, you know, the twins, for obvious reasons, the props outside of the, you know, by where the essentially where the main gear track is. But as far as for the singles, there's a couple of things that people kind of forget that hangs down from the wings, and one of them is a pitot tube. And I can't tell you how many times I've fixed bent pitot tubes, or totally trashed pitot tubes from people, and then the wing skins from people hitting ice berms with their sticking their pitot tube into it. It cleared the wing, but it didn't quite clear the pitot tube. So that's one of the things that you know, you gotta pay attention. The other thing is tip tanks. Believe it or not, you know, they stick down just far enough that there are a lot of tip tanks out there with some scrapes and whatnot underneath of them, and a lot of these airport people, especially the smaller airport, they're bringing the county road crew in, or the city street department. They plow the street. They don't think that anything's going to be hanging over the edge of the street, so to speak. So it's kind of up to us to make sure that when you're clearing a runway, that you can actually clear it. I've been several places where the taxiway wasn't plowed wide enough for a Comanche to get off the runway, and or it was plowed wide enough, but they stacked the snow up to where, you know, it wasn't going to work. So those are things to think about.
Yeah, here at Danielson, the guys that were plowing today spent an hour, in fact, more like 2 hours out there with a bulldozer thing, pushing the snow back from the runway. They went back about 15 feet on each side. And it's very nice of them to do that.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, Zach, that's exactly when we had our 250 Comanche with tip tanks on many years ago. The runways themselves were fine, but the taxiways, we came back one day and we got halfway up the taxiway, and because of the tip tanks, suddenly we could feel them like just touching the snow. Of course, the top of those pegs are like solid ice. We didn't damage it, but we had to stop, shut the airplane down, and go and get someone, because we couldn't go back and we couldn't go forward. So you really do have to watch that.
Has anyone had any good luck with automobile battery tender in the winter? I have. And anybody paint the lead edges of their wings to discourage icing?
What about the leading edges of the wings?
Have them painted, not white.
And how does that discourage icing?
It doesn't discourage icing, but when you get above the clouds, the sun will warm them and the ice will fall off. And I've been doing that for probably 20 years of flying in the Northeast.
Actually, I have an opinion on the leading edges of the wings being painted. For most aircraft, now Comanches are kind of a funny exception, unless I'm wrong and I only know about the twins. But for most airplanes, they keep the main tanks in the front of the wings, in the space below, above, whatever, in front of the forward spar, such as in Bonanzas and pipe and you know, the funny Hershey bar pipers. So usually paint shops, you know, don't encourage painting the wings a dark color, especially because, you know, when the sun shines on the fuel, it expands. Maybe you just filled up the tanks, you're going to lose a couple gallons of fuel. It's kind of gets a little bit funny like that. So that's just, I know that's not much of a winterization thing, but you know, it's the flip
One
side
of the
of the coin
things
there.
that you know, if and I'm having a little bit of trouble with the theory on that, because if that was the case, then all the airplanes with black de-ice boots should melt all the ice off of it, you know, post haste when they had any sort of sunlight, and unfortunately that doesn't happen. So I'm really, I don't know that painting your leading edge a darker color would cause any sort of you know, additional melting capability, because you still have this great big heat sink of a wing. It's all connected. It's still all cold. It's still all going through the same cold air. Yes, it will sublimate off with that cold air, but you know, I don't think you would find, and it might be something to go do, but I've got a laser, you know, thermometer. I could go up with an airplane with boots on it and see if there was a higher temperature on the leading edge than on the top of the wing, but I just don't know about that one. So the one thing that was said, you know, with the darker colors on the wings, as far as Comanche goes, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but most Comanches have had their co-pilot side main tank replaced more than their pilot side main tank, the right side versus the left side. And the main reason why the right tank usually gets replaced more is because the wing walk is black and it sits in the sun and it dries the top of the right main tank out quicker than the non-black wing. So that is something, but it is just that's mainly from an aircraft sitting outside and sitting in the sun with no real ambient airflow. So.
And Zach, your photos have been received, so if you need them to be shown,
yeah,
I know.
Yeah, let's talk about, as long as we're let's kind of keep going down through here, and I feel free to anybody else that wants to jump in, but you know, I think we've kind of talked about the pre-flights and the taxiways, but one of the things that Bill Schnoffer had a problem a few years ago where, and I'll bring this up, but he didn't have enough gas to make it to Florida on board, so he had to land gear up because his gear froze in the wells, and he took off on a slushy runway, and it was just above freezing, and he put the gear up, and he got about 2,000 feet in the air, and everything froze, and it froze in the wheel wells. So if you're going to operate with you know, you just taxied through some water, it's right at freezing. When you take off, just leave the gear down for the first 1,000 feet or so. Airplane will still climb. But what that does is that allows anything to either freeze or blow off. And once it's already frozen, it's not going to freeze in the wells. So the gear goes up, it's still frozen, it's still frozen when it comes down, but it still goes up and down. So that's a good thing. Now, okay, so we've got a couple of pictures here, which it was actually kind of fortuitous. This is actually from today, and I wanted to show what different surfaces collect ice and the rate at which they collect ice. And this is my 180, and that is my ice detector. If everybody can see it, it is my OAT gauge, but as you can see, it's a perfect example of an ice detector in that it picked up a little bit of ice. It's one of the smallest radius on the aircraft, and so it will pick up ice.
Can't see it. Can anyone see it?
Can everybody see it? Or can
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
whoever
I can
is
see it.
sharing, you can use your cursor to point to it. We can see your cursor.
See my cursor? Perfect. So yeah, you can see the ice, just the ice right there.
Yep.
And so that is more or less in the center of the windscreen. So from the pilot seat, you can actually look up and you can see what your ice accumulation is, and if it's going to be accurate and is probably going to be a worst case scenario of anything on the airplane. Can I have the next picture, please? So this is the same event. This is the same aircraft. And notice this is, this is a trace of mixed icing is what this is, to give you a definition of it. It's mixed icing. It is not white, but it is not clear icing in the fact it doesn't look like it's a an ice. It doesn't look clear and doesn't have run back. It's granular, but it's not rime granular. So this is what we call mixed icing. But notice that the wing leading edge does not really have much in the way of ice, other than just a slight change in sheen. There was very little, if any, ice on the wing. But this is the same minor ice event that created what you saw in the OAT gauge. Next picture, please.
Zach, how much did you feel that at all, or is that
No,
just
not it? The aircraft slowed down about 3 or 4 mile an hour, but my airplane slows down about 3 or 4 mile an hour just flying into rain. So it's not there. There was no adverse anything. Now here we've got the little sea lights out here on the wingtip, and notice they pick up more ice than anything because the radius is tightest of pretty much anything on the airplane. So there you have, about a 1/4 inch ice almost. So that's another example of how ice builds up at different locations at different rates. Next picture. So this is the tail. Remember, there wasn't very much ice on the wing, but as you know, the tail of a Comanche is a very, very tight radius. And it had about a 1/4 inch of ice on it. And it's kind of tough to see, but there is where the cursor is, there's a screw, and you can see the ice built up in front of that screw, and it is about a quarter inch, maybe a little bit less, but it's close to a 1/4 inch of ice on the tail. Again, the nice thing about an all flying tail versus a stabilizer and a elevator is that your mean chord line doesn't change. You don't end up in a scenario where, as the lift changes because of the leading edge ice, that you then continue to increase and make the angle of attack higher and higher and higher because of the displacement of the elevator. And if anybody wants to see what that really looks like, there is a NASA ice flying video that they do it and they actually induce tail stalls in a twin otter, and it's available online, and it's very, very interesting, and it explains the whole aerodynamics of the tail stall and how everybody always does the wrong thing with it. When if it does break, you know, pull back harder is what they're saying. Don't push. So excuse me, don't pull back harder, push. You know, everybody, because the nose is going to drop suddenly and everybody pulls back. You have to push, you know, to break the tail stall, which is not what everybody's, you know, trained to do when they're looking at the ground.
Zach,
and that
that
is correct. Yep. So I think that's it for the pictures, right? Oh yeah. Okay, that's just another picture of the tail looking down, and you can see the buildup of ice. Again, it's mixed icing. You can see the leading edge is fairly clear, and then it does have a little bit of granular type of a surface there.
Zach, why is there a screw there?
This aircraft, well, the screw was there from a previous installation of a abrasion boot on the tail that is since long gone, and so that abrasion boot doesn't exist. But rather than reskin the tail, those riv nuts had to have something in them, so they have screws in them.
Hey, Zach, this is Rob, California guy.
Yes.
Hey, so I used to fly a lot of charter between Reno, Nevada, Boise, Idaho, and the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a truly a life-threatening ice encounter in a 414 on a Part 135 flight, where I flew into freezing rain and blah blah blah. I can tell you the whole war story, but I will tell you that I did accumulate a pretty good load of ice on the elevator and the stabilizer. And what I found I had to do was the airplane occasionally would start a fugoid oscillation, a bit of a porpoise,
mm-hmm.
and I would try to dampen it out, you know, like flying the plane, dampen it out. But the only way I could get the airplane to stabilize was to just lose a little altitude and just change the dynamic of the speed, the airspeed going over that flight control for a little while. And that would buy me some stability, but I was forced to continually lose altitude incrementally in the clouds on an airway above the Sierra Nevada mountains, IFR, and it lasted about 20 minutes, which was before I broke out of the clouds and landed in Reno with a big buckload of ice all over the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Not to scare everybody, but when ice does form on an airplane, you just don't know what you're going to get sometimes because it changes everything. And I just kind of stumbled on, hey, if I lose altitude, I can dampen that oscillation and I can keep control of the airplane. Pitch control.
Absolutely.
So,
yep.
You know, it was real scary, and it was as close as I ever felt to panic in an airplane in 50 years of driving one, to tell you the truth. But anyway, if you're, here's some old man wisdom. If this happens to you, throw the rule book out of the window and find a flight condition that'll get the airplane out of the icing conditions without jeopardizing the aerodynamics. So if you've got an airplane that won't fly at a certain airspeed, you know, fool around with it a little bit, because if you're stuck with a load of ice, you are a test pilot, and it's something to really be taken serious. And you know, I'm a California pilot, but in California we have some real radical weather changes where you can take off in shirt sleeves and pretty soon you're flying along at 19 below zero somewhere, and you could just as soon be flying in Minnesota someplace. So I just wanted to throw that in there that the formula is going to vary.
Yes.
And the best thing to do is not get yourself in that situation to begin with.
Yeah, number one thing, when you get ice, I don't care if you've got an airplane that's capable of shedding the ice or not, but even airplanes that are certified for flight into quote unquote known icing, and this goes to exactly what you're saying, they are only certified to fly for 5 minutes in moderate icing.
Right.
And anything severe icing or anything longer than 5 minutes, you're a test pilot.
Right, exactly. And this one had boots, it had hot props, it had a heated windshield, had all that. It was a 414 pressurized twin, and it was an encounter with freezing rain. It wasn't, so it didn't creep up on me, but it did. The icing, the anti-icing in the airplane just it would throw ice from the propellers and make a big racket. And other than that, it wasn't going anywhere. It was stuck.
For those of us that don't have any icing, de-icing equipment on the airplane, one of the things you're talking about propellers, one of the things that you always want to do first, if you get into an inadvertent icing situation, and that is to go to max RPM.
Mm-hmm.
Centrifugal force will clear as much of the blade as possible. If you look at airplanes with boots on the prop, hot props, alcohol props, anything that has a boot on the prop, it's less than a quarter of the length of the blade, and that is because the tangential velocity of the prop is so great outboard of that the ice won't adhere to the prop. So the faster you get the prop going, the more it will naturally clear itself. The other thing that you may or may not know, and this is for the 250 and 260 guys, the 180s with the rear mounted governors isn't a problem, and the twins, it isn't a problem. But with the 250s and the 260s, you can freeze your actuating cable and you will be stuck at whatever RPM you have. If enough ice gets on that rod that comes up and runs your governor, that's what you're going to have. If you're cruising along at 1900 RPM, you're going to have 1900 RPM, and that's not real great if you need the horsepower. So
absolutely true. Amen to that. I've been there.
Yeah.
260, it froze solid.
Yep.
If you don't increase your RPM, you're going to have a hard time climbing.
Absolutely. So
thanks for bringing that up. That's really good.
That's something to think about.
And Zach, speaking of that, I've had that issue too, but also there's a little rubber piece where the actuator comes out of the conduit at your governor, and mine was missing that. And so every time I got up, I'd take off in Florida, climb up to 12,000 in the rain. And once I got up to 12,000, it's below freezing, and it would freeze, and my prop my prop control wouldn't work. Well, replacing that little rubber boot didn't solve it completely, but it helped a lot from no boot to a good new rubber boot. So I guess I'd ask everybody to take a look at yours and make sure you got that boot on the little rod that comes out of the conduit to control your prop governor.
Somebody just, I'm sorry, it flashed off my screen here, but somebody asked, where's the best place to see ice when it starts to form on a twin? And one thing that I've always used, and it's a real great indicator, and that's your spinners. If you start seeing ice on the spinners, you should never see any ice come back more than about a third of the way on the spinner. If you see ice coming back more than a third on the spinner, hang on, because that's severe icing. And you know, you can see the depth on the spinner. The very tip of the spinner starts to get to grow, and then it'll start to actually get horns on it. And that'll happen before your wing actually. It's in a twin Comanche. It happens at about the same rate as what's going on in your tail. So that's a really good way to look at it.
I concur with that. When I had my 414 event, it grew horns. It was kind of freaky looking out there, really. About 3 or 4 inches. I tried to break one off after I landed and put it in my ice chest to show the other guys, but it melted on my way back to Concord. It was incredible.
And that actually, this is CJ. Could you guys talk about rime versus clear versus mixed? And the reason I ask is for those that looked at the FAA link in the invite, it links to FAA picture and educational thing about different types of ice. And one of the things that they said was a characteristic of mixed is it grows horns. So can you distinguish between the ice on the spinner? Is that mixed, or is it going to be true for no matter what kind of ice you're getting? And how do we tell what we're getting? And why does it matter?
One of the things of this, you know, the spinner has different dynamics because it's actually spinning. So it is, you're dealing with some physics, not only of direct airflow, but you're also dealing with stuff, you know, a cotton candy machine, so to speak. So that's a bit of a difference. Mixed icing has a tendency to end up with a square profile. It's not really, I mean, when it gets really, really bad, it grows horns, but it starts to build up and it ends up not conforming to the leading edge of the wing. So what happens is, if you've got the leading edge of the wing, the ice starts to build up, and then it actually compresses on the front. And if this is the oncoming air, this is kind of what happens. And it, as it continues, it starts to build up, and then the horns, if my knuckles are like the horns, it starts to build out. And, you know, clear icing does just flow back and conform over the wing. Clear icing is heavy because it is, you know, it is a block of clear ice, and it's very, very heavy, but it doesn't mess up aerodynamics quite as much. So if you have clear ice, your airplane gets heavy, but you still got a wing that's somewhat the way it was designed. Mixed icing, when it starts to get that big, you know, 2x4 event is what I call, you know, somebody nailed a 2x4 to the front of your wing. That not only is heavy, but it now has screwed up the entire aerodynamics of your airplane. And, you know, what's your critical angle of attack with this new airfoil? You don't know. Rime icing just looks like rock candy out there. And it's full of air. It does mess up, you know, it messes up the aerodynamics of the wing, but of all the ices, it weighs the least. So, you know, you don't have the double whammy of having reduced lift and having to carry more weight. Mixed icing is really the most dangerous, in my opinion. But rime will build the fastest.
I would add to that a little bit in the key factors are, first of all, is, you know, how fast that water droplet freezes when it hits the plane. And if it's real cold and it's a very small droplet, you're going to get rime, because it's going to impact and it's going to freeze immediately. And, you know, most of it is going to build up just on the leading edge of the wing, and it's going to build up, you know, more in conformance. It kind of wants to build, you know, straight out into the quiet zone of the airflow, where the airflow has started to split, you know, well before it actually impacts the wing. Rime will kind of build up into that. The bigger the droplet is, and the closer it is to freezing, is the, you know, it impacts, and then it works its way backwards before it starts, you know, to completely freeze. And so, you know, a large droplet that's just barely above freezing is going to get you, or barely below freezing is what's going to get you your clear ice, because it's got a little bit of time for the water to flow back before it freezes. And mixed is somewhere in the middle, and that and the mixed is certainly what has a tendency to do the weird stuff. And sometimes it can get pretty weird as to what kind of formations, you know, it wants to make, and what it does to your airflow. So one thing I would caution on when you've got run back and freezing, you know, watch. If you see that situation, you probably need desperately to change altitude, unless you're just in something you're going to be out of in a few seconds. Because if it starts to freeze in the same place, you're going to start building up a ridge on the top of your wing, and you're making your own little spoiler there. And that's almost one of the worst situations you can possibly get into. And changing altitude even by a little bit is going to cause that, you know, freezing spot to move a little bit, and will at least delay your building up your little spoiler on top of the wing.
Kristin, what time?
Mm-hmm. And Ron, Keil, do you want to jump in? Because Ron had quite a lot to say on exactly that last night.
Well, my experience with clear is it affects me immediately, and I see drastic changes in ground speed and airspeed if I want to look at that. But if I get clear, I'm out of it, you know, before I even have clearance to get out of it. And usually, if I know it's going to be, the conditions are such that I'll have clear, I already know what my out is. You know, I'm either turning or going down or going up, and I'm starting to do that as soon as I get it.
Keil.
I agree.
And
watch your airspeed for rime ice. Rime ice slows an airplane down.
And Ron, and everybody, when you, sorry, this is CJ. When you speak, just really quickly, just say your name and then jump in, because I'm taking notes, and if you don't want to, that's okay too. But I'm taking notes that will then be provided back to the group, because this is a ton of amazing experience. And then can we get back to, so Ron, last night you said something really interesting about how much of a dramatic effect you had on your ground speed. Can you go ahead and repeat that?
I'm talking
with clear ice?
20 or 30 knots change and immediate. My experience with rime, and this is flying over, you know, Lake Erie and Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. Rime usually comes on fairly slow for me, and I can watch it, and I can tell what's going to happen by, you know, what happens in 5 or 10 minutes. Do I get a quarter of an inch in 15 minutes, or am I getting an inch in 15 minutes? And that tells me, you know, if I'm getting a quarter of an inch in 20 or 30 minutes, I've only got 20 or 30 minutes to fly, I'll keep going and land. If I'm picking up an inch in 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, I gotta change something right away. But
I concur with Ron completely on that.
But I've always been able to look at it and watch it grow and time it. And that helps make the decision. Where my clear experience has been, I don't have time to do anything. I just have to get out of it immediately.
So I'd like to ask a question of everybody here. When I look back at my harrowing experience, I picked an altitude that I thought would be clear the freezing level. It was solid IFR, and I ended up like a race between the altitude I could maintain and the MOA. And when you have an MOA over terrain like that, it becomes like a twofold decision. You know, do you want to go high? Do you want to go low when you get if you do get in an ice situation? So, has anybody ever been stuck between a rock and a hard spot where they couldn't climb anymore because they had, they can barely sustain altitude and they can't go down below the MOA because there's a bunch of rocks down there that's going to kill them. So it's interesting when you plan a flight, I would think, to look at the MOAs, even if you're VFR, and know that that's kind of the bottom limit. And the old adage, change your altitude up 2,000 or down 2,000. Based on your flight planning, you might not have that down 2,000 option, and that should be something you think about.
One thing, the other thing we haven't mentioned too much here, this is Ron again, is I try to only fly in those conditions during the daytime, because a lot of times in the wintertime, there are layers and you can get out of, you can be in the clouds, but a few thousand feet below you or above you, you're going to be back out of it again. If you're flying at night, it's hard to see that. If you're flying in the daytime, you can tell when you're in a layer or not. So I don't always follow that rule, but I try to only fly in those conditions during daylight hours.
That's good.
And Rob, one thing that I can pull out of my tool of experience, tool bag of experience, I have been in exactly the same situation that you were in, except it was on the East Coast instead of the West Coast. And the way out of it for me was I actually was able, due to the MEAs, I was unable to get any lower unless I joined an approach procedure. And what I did was I actually shot an approach to an airport I had no intention of landing at, but in being cleared for the procedure, they were actually able to get me a lower altitude. And I knew I only needed to come down another 1,000 feet to get out of the freezing level. But it was in a Cherokee 6, and it was to the point where I need down, or I was actually going to be coming down, and
the feeling.
But by being able to get the approach clearance and descend on the procedure, it was an out that I was able to do, and I didn't end up on the rocks, so to speak.
That was using all your resources. That was great. I'm gonna put that one away. Hopefully, I'll never have to use it. But there wasn't very many approaches out there where I was.
No, yeah, but then one of the things that we're trying to do with this is you may never need some of the things that are said on these Zooms, but if you do, hopefully somebody said it.
Hey, Zach, it's Dave Shaver.
Oh, by the way, it was nice seeing you down in Martinsville. I wanted to mention about icing in a climb. My partner and I, when we early on get in the airplane, I learned real quick that the low-wing airplanes, if you get into icing in a climb, you're going to see it on the leading edge, but you're not going to see as much as what's under the wing, because as you're climbing, that ice is rolling under the wing more, it seemed to us. And we had this situation. My partner was flying. It was an instrument trip, of course. And I said, let's go back. I got a feeling we got ice under the wing. And he says, no, it doesn't look like there's much out there at all. And I said, let's go back. This stuff looks a little clear, a little too clear for me. Let's go back. So we went back and we landed. And of course, we were flying out of our 2,000-foot strip then. So he couldn't maintain a whole lot of extra speed. When we came in to land, the airplane dropped out from under him, but he caught it and the airplane didn't hit hard enough to hurt anything. But it really surprised both of us. I mean, I was thinking, you know, it could happen, and it did. We got to the gas pumps and it was amazing how much ice was under the wing that you could not see.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to mention that if you get icing.
Well, exactly. It all has to do with the angle of attack that the airplane's flying. If the impact zone is essentially the leading edge of the wing, that's where the ice is going to be. If the impact zone is around, you know, underneath the leading edge of the wing, i.e., in a lower speed, high alpha type maneuver, you know, obviously in icing conditions, you want to climb as fast as the airplane will climb. It's not a time to be hanging it on the prop doing a VX climb. And that keeps the ice on the front of the wing, as opposed to exactly what you're saying, under the wing. And on the belly of the airplane too, believe it or not. You can have significant drag from ice building up on the belly of the airplane. And there are many aircraft out there that have minimum airspeed in icing condition. And that is exactly for that reason, because the ice will build on unprotected surfaces if you don't maintain that airspeed.
Yeah, Kristin here. King Air is one example. They've got you climbing at a higher, and that's in the POH, climbing at a higher airspeed, lower angle of attack in icing conditions. Fortunately for King Air, you've got a little spare power, but.
Well, even a Citation 500 with a straight wing has 160 knot minimum speed in icing conditions.
Hey, Zach, it's Dave Shaver. Unfortunately, my battery went dead right then. So I did not get to hear your comments. If you wouldn't mind repeating them, I'm back, plugged in and back.
Well, one of the things that we were just talking about was, you know, in icing conditions, you want to climb at a lower angle of attack at a higher airspeed, because anytime that you are presenting a surface to the wind, you know, if you're climbing, especially at a lower airspeed, your impact zone, so to speak, on the wing moves around below the leading edge. And so, yes, if you can, you know, in icing conditions, you want to climb at the highest practical airspeed that you can make the airplane climb, and that keeps the impact area as much on the leading edge of the wing as possible, so that it you know, has a lesser area of ice accumulation. And one of the other things that I mentioned was the not only under the wings, but also on the belly of the airplane, you can actually build up ice, and which is a high drag scenario as well. So
okay, I appreciate it. I didn't want to back the meeting up too much, but I did want to get your response. Thank you. Sorry about the battery.
No problem. Yeah.
I don't actually even want to talk about how many particular response that Zach and Kristin had done, both of them, bears repeating. This is stuff I think we all want to make sure we really nail down and understand. This is CJ. Just we are so there's a ton of questions that are in the chat window, and we're not going to get through all of this tonight, which is great because it's such a critical subject. So we're going to stay on icing, but I wanted to let you guys finish this. Dave Shaver, Zach Grant, Kristin Winter, Ron Keil, you guys were all talking about this. And then if it's all right with you all, I'd like to just go and get some of the questions in the chat window out to you. So continuing with the discussion about when you're climbing into icing conditions, how to climb. I'd love to, Zach, would you finish? And then Kristin and Ron, will you weigh in? And then I'm gonna ask if I can read in questions.
Well, I don't really know that I have a whole lot more to add other than, you know, if possible, anytime you start to encounter ice, try to climb, because sooner or later the airplane isn't going to climb anymore. If you think that there's an escape above, then always try to go there. If your only escape is to descend out of the clouds into warmer air, well, then that's good too. But if it's freezing all the way to the surface, go up and try and get out of the clouds, or get into a in between layers, like Ron said. Oftentimes in the wintertime, especially around the Midwest and the East Coast, not so much out in the Rockies or the Sierras, but usually a couple 1,000-foot change in altitude will get you out of the the significance of the ice.
Is there a rule of thumb? I'm sorry, this is Steve. Is there a rule of thumb as far as how fast it accumulates to where it's going to affect you? Like, Zach, on your pictures, how long were you in there?
Oh, that was about I actually went looking for ice today, by the way, for this. So that was about a half, about 20 minutes in and out of kind of scraggly undercast.
Would you say that area was under a air met for icing, or would it have shown up as a low probability of icing where you were flying today?
Well, it was where I was flying today. It was about -2 degrees or Celsius, -2 degrees Celsius, and it was intermittently raining, sleeting, snowing, whatever on the ground. So it was right at freezing, +1 or so on the ground. So that's what I went and I figured I could find some today, and that's what I did.
Just curiously, yeah. So that would be a no-go for me anyway. But what was your out?
Clear below.
Gotcha.
One of the things, this is Dave Shaver again, one of the things that I've done, and I've had ice on the Comanche more times than I should probably admit, and my wife just walked here into the next room and she could probably shake her head and tell you that, because half the time she wants to hit me when I'm in there, but I do get out of it. I don't just stay there. But one of the things I always do, if I know there is a possibility that this could happen, even if it's not forecasted, and I won't go, of course, if it's forecasted, but if I think it's going to be there, I'm looking at what's the bases underneath of me, and I want to know that I can get into that clear air. And we had a situation with that a few years ago, coming home from down in I guess it was in the Carolinas somewhere, and we got into the ice, and I was listening to the ATISes. This was I guess it was more than a few years ago. This was pre-4-flight days. And I was listening, and I knew that I had to, that I had the minimum en route altitude I could go down to, and I had to. And I was coming out of 6. The guy asked me if I could stop at 5, and I said, I'll look. I never looked. I kept going. I said, I need 3 right now. And he gave it to me. I mean, he says, okay, you're cleared down to 3. And out of about 3,800 feet, we came out the bottom of it. And that's what I was fully expecting to see. So like Zach said, have an out. Make sure you know what your outs are. And if you don't have any, don't chance it.
And how quickly did you shed it, Dave?
Oh, it came off reasonably quick, but these airplanes are tremendous. They will haul. I mean, I shouldn't say this, but they do a great job of continuing to fly. But you've got to do something. You got to go up, down, or back, and you got to do it right now. You can't be sitting there looking at it. You gotta do something at that point when you see you're starting to pick up a significant amount of ice.
You need to have a strategy before you even launch into the ice.
Absolutely.
You need to, pilot reports are your friends. You need to know if there's any inversions out there. You need to know where the tops are. You need to know what the bottoms are looking like. Are you going to end up having to land the airplane, contaminated, or have you got enough warm air underneath you to dump what you're going to pick up? I mean, all of these things factor into a go, no go decision before you even pull the plane out of the hangar. You want to know, can I punch up through this and get up on top? And, knowing where the tops are, is key. And then you've got to be prepared to know, what's your out if you start to build too much. I mean, if you're trying to climb up through a layer, you need to look at, you need to keep in mind that, if you're picking up rime ice, that doesn't tend to flow back and build up, and you stand a better chance of punching out of the top. If you start climbing into it and all of a sudden you see it's running back or your airspeed's bleeding off too quickly, then you need to have in mind, that you're gonna, immediately turn around, ask for the nearest approach and be prepared to head for the, final approach fix to get yourself back in, fairly quickly. You need to work that through in your mind before you launch off, into the icing conditions.
And it appears that that's only going to come with experience. So, like, if there's a 2,000-foot layer that you think you can get on top in the clear, you're talking 4 minutes. Well, is that 4 minutes that's going to really impede your climb, and you need to be starting to turn back around, or what? I guess those of us who don't have experience, we really don't have a concept. It's like kind of like the first time I jumped out of an airplane. I had no clue what that feeling is going to be.
Well, Kristin, can you? Oh, go ahead. I was just going to ask you to repeat what you had said, because what you just said was so beneficial, because you're basically saying to people, watch your situation, change your plan if you need to. Well, sorry, Kristin, keep going.
I mean, you right. I mean, you don't know for certain unless an airplane's just taken off and giving you a good report. And even then the conditions can change. But you don't know how fast it's going to build up. I mean, 4 minutes is not typically a big deal. I mean, if you're a 2,000-foot layer, chances are if it's really bad that you've got pilot, and there's any traffic out there at all, you've got pilot reports and people are screaming about it. But you do need to keep in mind that 4 minutes in 90%, 90+ probably % of the cases, you're going to climb through it just fine. But you've got to be paying attention. When you first punch into it, you need to monitor your climb performance, your airspeed, and how fast this is building up. And if it surprises you, the airplane will fly longer than it will climb. So just because it isn't going to climb, unless you try to force it to climb, you're going to be able to hold altitude, longer than you can. And so be prepared to come back down again. And again, you have to ask yourself, what are the conditions that I'm punching up through? I mean, if you're taking off and it's, 200 and a half, you know, in snow, and you think you can get on top at 4,000, you know, great, but you know, keep in mind that you're going to have to, you know, shoot a low approach in a contaminated airplane. Are you really up for that? On the other hand, you know, if your 2,000 foot layer starts at 2,000, you know, and ends at 4,000, well, you got a lot of space underneath. Again, all of those things should factor into your go, no go decisions. And certainly what the ambient temperatures are. You know, if you're closer to the -10, which is the, you know, colder part of the red zone, and you're looking at straightest layers, nine times out of 10, that's just going to be rime ice, and you aren't going to have any issues punching up through it. You know, if it's, you know, -1 degree, -2 degree kind of thing, you know, then it could be a bigger issue. Another thing you've got to consider is, you know, what's the ground doing to you? Because even small amounts of terrain with some decent surface winds can create a mountain of ice. You know, the one that you wouldn't think of that I used to run into all the time was going between Lansing and the upper Michigan. And even though, you know, the bluffs and the dunes along Lake Michigan, you know, in the Traverse City area where we would cross are not very high, you wouldn't think of it. But when the conditions are right and you've got a strong northwesterly wind coming across the lake, picking up moisture, it takes very little to start to push that air up into colder. And that's when you get the larger supercooled droplets, when you've got that orographic lifting. And, you know, even so, it doesn't necessarily take huge mountains if the conditions are right, you know, to create what is in effect a mountain of ice. I have had to go up to 10,000 feet across the shore of Lake Michigan to avoid catching too much ice in that exact type of condition. You know, personally, I think the FAA goes about icing all wrong in that they try to certify the airplane, and what they really need to be doing is training and certifying the pilots. Because every airplane can put a little bit of ice on, and no airplane will take an infinite amount.
Wow, that was profound. Have you guys just talked yourself into giving a icing? I think we need to, I think what we're hearing, I'm just looking at Zach nodding and looking pretty somber. I know I've talked to Ron Keil about this quite a lot. I expect us to come back and talk more about how to do what Kristin, you just said. How do we train the pilots?
Well, I'd like to,
for icing decision making.
This is Steve again. I'm sorry, I'm really beating this horse, but when you look at icing reports, normally when it's IMC, you're looking at turbine aircraft creating the reports, and you know that anytime I see a turbine aircraft making a report, it's really much a no-go for me. But you know, and I guess the air mets follow, so therefore we're illegal if we jump into an air met. But you know, is there a consistent level of icing reporting that we can use kind of realistically for what we're going to experience?
No.
I'll try to weigh in here. I don't think so. I think what you're really more interested in is what are the temperatures, where are the clouds? You know, the icing is going to be in the clouds. If you're in clear air, you're not going to get icing unless you got, you know, large water droplets falling from a cloud way above you, and you're below freezing. So if you're the first 2,000 or 3,000 feet of your flight is above freezing, and then it goes to freezing, and then you're on top at 4,000 or 5,000, you're probably going to be able to fly that. And if you do get in trouble, you come down to 3,000 and you're in warm air. or maybe it's 6,000 or 7,000 where the warm air starts. So what you really want to know is you want to know, what are the temperatures? Do you have an inversion layer? Where are the clouds? Are there layers? Is this stratus or cumulus clouds? Is it clear or rime ice? And some of the pilot reports will give you that, and some may or may not. I've flown in areas where no icing reporting, none forecast and none reported. And I'm going over Niagara Falls at 10,000, and this big water droplet, one water droplet hits my windshield and covers the whole windshield. A few more hit me, and I end up climbing up to 12,000 to get above that little cloud that was dropping all that water on me. And then now I'm out of it, but nobody forecast it. Nobody said anything about it, but it was there. But I knew that I could get on top at 12 and I'd be in the clear and make this stuff off.
I think the closest I could come up with a decent rule is, when you're first learning to fly in the ice and what your plane will do, stick to situations where you've got at least 2,000 feet of warm air between the ground, the ground and the freezing level, because it's a whole, you've got a grate out there. Once you get into the warmer air, the ice can come off the airplane usually fairly quickly, and you don't have to worry about trying to land a contaminated airplane. And so, to the degree that anyone can come up with some sort of a rule, and it's pretty difficult when you're talking about icing conditions, because there are so many different factors. But totally the best out is a layer of warm air underneath you. I've flown both the Great Lakes and Southeast Alaska, and by reputation, everybody says Southeast Alaska is worse for ice, and I beg to differ. I put more ice at certain, at a time in Southeast Alaska, but I almost always had warm air underneath me, so I didn't have to land a contaminated airplane. Not around the Great Lakes, not so much. You spend about 3 months at least, pretty much guaranteeing you're going to have to land the contaminated airplane.
Yeah, you're right, Kristin. And the worst times for me for flying around the Great Lakes is the end of November and most of December, and then into March and April. January and February, where it's 0 or below 0, I rarely get any ice. I mean, you could in the clouds, but I rarely get any because it's so cold. It's already frozen. But when you got this, it's 30 something on the ground and you get up to 3,000 or 4,000 feet, you're just below freezing, and you get into a cloud, and the Great Lakes haven't frozen over yet. So you got a lot of moisture coming up from them. You're going to get into some of it. And that's when hopefully you have a good forecast and a good plan, but you also got to fly defensively, because you're going to change altitude, you're going to change direction, you're going to make changes during your flight because things that come up while you're flying. But I wanted to bring something else up about flying in this, and this might be unique to some of our older airplanes. I have picked up ice on my vents to my fuel tanks. And I'm talking about golf ball size glob of ice, or whatever you want to call it, snowball or whatever it was, on the vents, to the point where it's starting to suck the fuel tank in. I found the only defense for that is continually switch tanks every 15 minutes. So and then I'll have little air holes through those big globs of ice. But guys with the newer planes have got the better style vents, and you don't have that tube sticking out below your wing that's picking up the ice. But that's something to worry about. The other thing is impact ice from snow. especially, and I can't speak for the older, the pre-1961 Comanches with the square inlet, but the oval inlet, I've had mine fill up with impact snow to the point where it is completely closed off the induction system. And the only way I could keep the engine running was run carburetor heat. And, they say only run off or on carburetor heat. I'd run whatever it took to keep the engine running, playing with that in the mixture to get, to get some economy. And I don't know, Kristin, if you or Zach have had any of those experiences or not, but I certainly have in December and March in the Great Lakes area.
Well, Ron, what the interesting thing about that, and it wasn't even ice, flying in heavy snow with a square inlet, the snow, and this is again in my 180 bracket air filter, square inlet, and the snow obstructed the air filter so much that it actually I don't have a latching carb heat cable. It's just a push pull and operates on friction, but it actually sucked the carb heat open. I actually noticed the knob had pulled out of the panel, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I shoved it back in and the engine quit. So it had actually, basically done an automatic alternate air scenario where it had actually sucked the flapper door open to get some air. So that was very very interesting.
This is CJ. Just I was a couple of weeks ago on my way out to California. I ended up flying in wet snow underneath and put in carb heat in the carbureted 180, and my carb heat froze open.
Froze open?
And I managed I could not push my carb heat back in, and I was like, well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Got stuck. Yeah.
Yep. So, and once I flew out of the icky stuff and into clear air, eventually I was able to close it, but that was a new one.
Zach,
so
have you ever had that mechanism come apart in your hand? You've got the little latch by squeezing on it so you can move the carburetor heat knob back and forth.
Yeah, that's why I don't have one anymore.
Well, just the other day, I'm pulling on that and the thing popped in my hand and the spring and a couple pieces went flying on the floor.
I think I can eclipse that one. I had the trim wheel of a Tomahawk come off in my hand and roll all the way back.
So let's see. Yeah, that'll do it.
Sort of wonder why we do this to ourselves.
I sold that Tomahawk the next day.
Fortunately, with a Tomahawk, you aren't actually trimming anything. You're just changing spring pressure on the yokes.
Yeah, that both saved my life and caused the issue. I mean, it would never in a Warrior it would never have gone anywhere, but at least knowing that the trim rolling back just made meant I had to put a lot of forward pressure in to get the same reaction out. It did. The fact that it was on 50 foot off final approach was the dangerous bit, because I barely had time to react to get the nose down.
Alrighty, so just a couple of comments from the chat window. I'm going to, there were a couple of comments saying make sure you've got a good, fresh working ELT for winter flying, and possibly a personal locator device. Those are available on Amazon for varieties of money, from generally $200 to $300, many of which have monthly subscriptions, but you will be found. C.S. Flanagan commented, file a flight plan or at least get flight following. Any comments from Zach, Kristin, or Ron?
Well, I'll start out. In this time of the year, it's hard to go anywhere without it being IFR, either where you're going or where you started from. So I pretty much file IFR for every flight. And if I didn't, I definitely would be talking to ATC and getting flight following. You know, to go anywhere from where we live in Michigan, we have to fly over Canada. And the rules are you have to be talking to ATC and you have to have a unique transponder code. So we're kind of used to talking to them from where I live anyway.
All right, common sense and necessity then. Anyone have, let's see, just a quick question. If you've got recommendations for remote cellular, not Wi-Fi switches for turning on a Tannis heater that can live outdoors for Comanches that are tied down outside out of Wi-Fi range, if you could post into the chat window, that would answer several people's questions about how to handle remote triggering of heaters.
Hey, CJ, their Tannis, when I was on one of their seminars before I bought my heater, they did talk about one of those. It's not cheap, but if that's your, if that's the only way you have, it's a pretty good deal. But I don't know if they're sold through Tannis, but they do know about them if they don't sell them directly. So I would recommend you contact the guys at Tannis.
You can get one for about $200. I've got one in my hangar, my T hangar, that unfortunately operates on the GSM 3G network, which is getting shut down in the spring. So yeah, I'm going to have to get another one, but yeah, they're text on, text off, just plugs right in, and it even tells me the temperature in my hangar when I text it. So they are out there. I do need to take a look and see what the next 4G, 5G version is going to be.
Zach, Chuck Stroh here. Last week's AOPA, they do the video every week. They talked about one. Tom Horn did a little article on it or a little video on it. So check that out.
Okay. Thanks.
Zach, if I could bring up a anecdote and a question, we've talked a fair amount about contaminated airplanes, but we haven't talked about contaminated runways. Several years ago, I was taking off from my airport. We don't have plows, and we don't have coefficient of friction reports like a Class Bravo. I figured I could take off, and so I had full right rudder, but it was not enough to overcome P factor. And I left the runway, went into the grass area, and I was barely able to take off without hitting anything. So that was quite a harrowing experience, thinking I could take off on this runway, but I couldn't.
Well, one of the things that obviously, if you have lower friction on the runway, you have to counteract that somehow, and that would be by aerodynamic forces. One of the things that I tell people always is make sure you pin a wing. If very rarely do you never have a crosswind. You're going to have a little bit of a crosswind one way or the other. Always pin that upwind wing, and do a rolling takeoff and open the throttle very, very slowly so that you actually have aerodynamic force with the rudder that you can keep the aircraft on the center line with, and not be reliant upon the nose tire to give you all of your directional control, so to speak. So pinning the wing will obviously keep as much weight on one of the mains as possible, as long as possible, and then getting if you need to actually crab down the runway, if you lose all friction, just fly the airplane. And keep it going down the runway until you can get it airborne. So that is definitely something to think about. The other thing to think about, and thank goodness our airplanes slow down rather well, but brakes don't work very well when they have no friction to act upon the wheels. So I've had a couple of experiences where I was glad I had a much longer runway than I thought I was going to use, simply because of that. And so obviously, when in doubt, go look for a long runway. Go look for an airport that has more traffic. Don't go to the county airport. And if it's not your home base, so be it. If you got to go to international, go to international. They've put the urea on the runway. They've sanded the runway. You're gonna get stopped.
And Kristin, since you've got so much time flying a twin in all sorts of interesting conditions, do you want to comment on taking off and landing with a twin in these kinds of situations?
Well, it's, I mean, Zach sort of hit it. The only real difference in a twin is that you do have the ability, if you've got a stiff crosswind, you have the ability to, lead a little bit with the upwind engine. So you can, if you've got a left crosswind, just keep the start with the left engine and get that a half an inch ahead of the other one, and then run them, but kind of together until you've got good rudder authority. And sometimes if you get in a situation where you're skidding a little bit, if your rudder's not quite making it because you just don't have the speed, pulling back on the downwind, you can use that a little bit. Basically, you can think about it is you're using your two throttles like a steering wheel. If you kind of turn them or juice the orange a little bit, in the direction you want the plane to turn, it will do it. Fortunately, I don't think I've ever gotten a situation that I really desperately needed to do that, but I have in a slippery enough runway, I have landed in a crab, and just slipped down the runway sideways until the wheels started to grab a little bit and then kicked the crab out. Fortunately, that's not
Zach?
something I've had to do very often because it's a little hairy.
I've done it.
I'm just trying to picture.
It can get your attention. Yep.
I'm picturing the twin Comanche and the 737 landing in the crab. Pete, go ahead. I'm going to try to stay real closely to the questions in the chat window because everybody's been courteous enough to put them there. But go ahead, Pete.
I was just suggesting that they put this back up because there's a possibility there will be wings credit. You do need to register. So this is how you do it.
And the only thing
and for those that are dialed in, just go to
when you register, if you know what your session name is, please include that. My name is Robert Klein. I'm the guy that compiles the stats from the Zoom logs to send to the FAA so you can get wings credit. So if you happen to log on as iPad, I can't track you. But if you put your, you'll have to give your email address. But if you happen to have your session name, that will just be a big help for me when I go to try to track it down.
Thank you. You can put that in the comment. There's plenty of room to put your name in like that. Okay, go back to your discussion. I'll just leave this up for a minute.
Yep. Okay, good deal. And for those that can't see it, Pete's saying go to northeastcomanche.org, click on Comanche Zooms. You'll see a register link near the top. Fill that in, and Pete and Robert will be able to try to submit for wings credit for you. Rob Whiteley said, rather entertainingly, Flatland, California pilots often quote unquote fall, close quote, for just a quote little frost, close quote. And I'm going to just really quickly, because we won't, we're going to try to wrap up by 9:30, just the section on icing. The FAA and AOPA published something that said frost, even on a non-NACA wing like ours, will kill 30% of your lift. And so don't ever fly with frost on your wings unless Kristin, Zach, or Ron want to counter that.
Depends on the wing and it depends on the frost. I mean, now the FAA has come up with it, basically says, you know, they used to say you could polish the frost, but now they say that will kill you. I guess I'm a cat with about 247 different lives then. But you know, again, it's kind of using a little bit of common sense, and understanding airplanes a little bit. I mean, you know, a big asymmetrical wing like on an Apache or an Aztec is going to act entirely differently and be entirely more forgiving than would be, you know, a Cirrus with a, you know, small polished wing that desperately needs laminar flow to get the thing off the ground. You know, when in doubt, don't take off with anything on the wings.
Another good point is to.
And you're saying that our laminar flow wings are our laminar flow wings, then, Kristin, from what you're saying, are possibly a little bit more sensitive to frost than like an Apache.
A little bit. Kind of depends on where it is too. I mean, you probably don't have laminar flow, you know, past the main spar. You know, so, you know, a small, extraordinarily thin patch after the wing spar is unlikely to kill you. You know, where, you know, a pile of hoarfrost is probably going to kill you. It's, you know, the problem is it's impossible to make a blanket statement to be absolutely true. So the powers that be make blanket statements to try to get you not to, you know, just say no. I think, you know, if you follow every blanket statement that anybody's ever made, the airplane never comes out of the hangar.
Fair enough. So the thing is to understand the aerodynamics of our wing. If you don't stay on the ground, if you do, then I think what you said is a little bit of a little bit of frost beyond the main spar is more tolerable than a big patch of frost inboard.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you know, it's just not all equal. I mean, there's, I mean, I've never not tried to get as much off as I could and get what I couldn't get off as smooth as I could, you know, but depending on the airplane, you know, sometimes I've gone and flown with what I had there. But, you know, again, you know, I can't make a blanket rule, you know, that to say, you know, you can't fly with some frost still on the airplane. I can make a blanket statement says if you aren't sure, don't. You better be sure that your airplane can handle what's there.
Yeah.
That the comment that someone made about you lose 30%. My 250 on a normal day, I can climb at about 1,500 feet per minute with me on board and not much else. If I have two people in the back seat and somebody else in the front seat and a couple of things in the luggage area, I'm not going to be climbing at 1,500 feet a minute. It's that's max performance. If I've got frost, it's not going to happen. If I've got frost though, and it's just me, then I can settle for 500 feet per minute.
So
the,
use your
the,
judgment and use your common sense.
the, the obvious danger is that A, you don't get it off the runway, or B, you don't get it out of ground effect.
Right.
But, again, I've certainly taken off in a Comanche without a perfectly clear wing. I worked on it as best I could, so I mean, I'm sure we were talking, thousandths of an inch of what was left on there, and it was pretty darn smooth. I'm not going to walk out and, oh, there's frost on the wing, no big deal, I'm out of here. But I've certainly had circumstances that after working on it, there were some patches left, and I figured I'd gotten them down to a few thousandths of an inch as best I could, and I left.
The incident that brought this up to me was a California guy that I knew had an airplane. It was a Cessna 210, and he packed 3 people in it and went out there, and the witnesses said, there was some frost on it, so he took his credit card out and he scraped it, and everybody was getting impatient. So he said, heck with this, and took off. And nobody got killed, but they got pretty mangled when he couldn't clear a ridge in the airplane. And again, all the talk about this rule, that rule, don't fly, this and that. I think the debate is well founded and very educational. But personally, I've flown airplanes with some frost on the wing, but it's I just wanted to emphasize by my comment that that every time you do something like that, you're making a judgment call. You're flying an airplane, and that airplane won't fly as designed. And make sure that that you understand that. And this guy, I think he understood it academically, but when it came to a little bit of pressure and a little bit of this frost stuff, because we don't get this stuff in California very often. It's pretty unusual. He either for lack of fear, because he didn't have a whole lot of experience with flying airplanes that were in any condition other than warm and dry, or it was the fear plus the terrain plus the pressure to get these guys off this little strip up in the hills. Anyway, again, one of my comments was there's a lot of variables, and one thing we haven't touched on that I'm sure anybody who's flown corporate or charter or Part 121, there is a certain pressure. It's a pressure that can cloud your judgment. So before I'm about done here, but there's psychological aspects to this stuff too, about getting there, get there-itis everybody talks about. But that was the particular, incident I had in mind. And not to belabor the point, but I'm not an aeronautical engineer. I can't look at a wing and go, oh, this is okay and this ain't okay, and all this stuff. So unless I've got a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling that, that's just a little frost, or, oh yeah, there's a nice layer of warm air here. My twin Comanche isn't equipped to deal with known icing conditions and a prolonged climb or a prolonged descent to get down to a place where I can shed the ice. It just ain't built for it. And so, you got to make sure that if you do make such a decision, your little voice is not saying, go ahead, go, you'll be okay, go. You listen to that little voice, and I don't know, there's my speech. But thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, no,
I learned a lot.
Rob, thanks for making that statement. This is CJ. Just very briefly, what Rob said, that little voice, that self-awareness that you're feeling pressure, that you're not making a completely unpressured decision is really important. I spent a lot of time reading Comanche accident statistics, and that little voice seems to be involved plenty of times. So to try to be aware of whether you're feeling pressured for any reason or not, so that you can know that you're making your clearest headed decision. I certainly can't, I don't have the experience or the expertise of Kristin and Ron and Zach, but I do read those reports a lot because I was trying to work on updating the ICS safety report, and that was a factor. It's a factor in all aircraft, but ironically, Bruce Landsberg, the AOP Air Safety Institute head, wrote the Comanche pilots, for whatever reason, seem to show that decision stuff even a little bit more. Maybe because our airplanes are so capable, but
Yeah, but could it
whatever it
not be
was.
because our aircraft inspires so much confidence in them that maybe isn't quite fully deserved?
Maybe no, the airplanes seem to deserve it, but it's
The
just
pilots, maybe.
just want to reinforce what Rob said. Another question. John W. just commented, let's see, good luck with air dryer brand RV dehumidifiers. And they don't get really hot, but based on the discussion of cabin heaters unattended burning down airplanes, used with great caution. Alpha Tango commented that frozen lakes can become emergency landing spots too. I'd love to run that one by Zach, Kristin, and Ron.
Well, there are
Yes,
places,
no, maybe.
there are places where they make winter airports.
Yeah, like Alton Bay.
Alton Bay Ice Runway.
But Alton Bay does not open the airport unless the ice is over 12 inches thick.
Wow.
Yeah, before you land on that ice, you want to know the thickness of the ice. When I started flying, we used to go up on Lake St. Clair and land in one of the bays there and go in and get lunch. But that was after, the ice fishermen had been out there and they could tell you how thick the ice was because they dug through it. People were driving cars and trucks and everything else out there. Few years ago, Lake Michigan was just about frozen all the way from Michigan to Wisconsin. And you probably could have landed a plane in some areas on that. But normally when you see some ice, it may only be a few inches thick. And from the air, you can't tell by looking at it, is it a few inches or a few feet thick? And if there's a channel and the water's moving, it may not be very thick at all. And then also, it may look smooth from the air, but you get down closer to it, there may be ridges because before it froze, the wind was blowing and there were waves. And I've seen waves go 30, 40 feet in the air. And you can see pictures of the western side of Michigan where some of the light towers are covered with ice from the waves. So you need to have somebody on the ground giving you, information about the thickness of the ice before you decide to land on it.
Well, yeah, if it's a discretionary thing, for sure. If the airplane's decided you're going to land, your choice is a forest in northern Minnesota in February or the lake. I'm going for the lake. I might leave the gear up just to hedge my bets, but I'm going for the lake, not the forest.
Well, I'll do that in the summertime too. I'd much rather ditch it in water than in a hilly forest.
Yep.
But if
like that.
But if you are going to fly over water, carry a good life raft because Lake Michigan will kill you with hypothermia even in the middle of the summer. But if you have a raft and you can get out of the water, you will survive it.
Zach, any comments on getting out of an airplane and when you've ditched in water? Or we may have lost Zach.
Open the door before you hit.
Yeah, Put something in the door to block it open, because if you crunch your airframe any, that door may not open very easily.
This is Ed Cullen. I don't know what it would be like. I had a twin Comanche, and I don't know what it would be like to get a good load of ice on that thing. I used to fly a 402 Cessna that didn't have windshield de-ice, but the rest of the airplane was de-ice. And the first thing I noticed was that I got a load of ice. Man, that sucker slowed down 25 knots. And then on another trip, I had on a letdown into Teterboro on the ILS, I got a load. I started to make ice. Well, I was so close, I wasn't going to do anything about it. But then the windshield went completely iced over. That adds a whole new aspect to landing.
That's what that
Especially,
that's
yeah,
what-
especially a twin, which has an engine where you want to look at the ground.
Yeah. On the singles, that little window on the left side is nice for that, because you can slip in and look out the window when your windshield's covered.
Yeah, but now nobody has anything to do to de-ice a windshield on these Pipers, do they?
Just your defroster.
That's a joke.
I've got a
Sometimes it'll-
I have a hot plate on my twin Comanche.
Yeah, they're pretty hard to get though. They're pretty scarce. Are the hot plates still available for the twins? Because on the singles, we have pretty good defrosters in general. To the point where many of us have distorted or cracked or otherwise damaged our plexiglass windscreens on the singles. But on the twins, you don't have that because your engines are out on the wings. So are the plates still available for the twins?
Yeah, they're out there. I mean, it's basically the same one they used on an Aztec and a Seneca and the Senecas that were in the Aztecs that were 12 volts. And at one point, Piper had a kit for that.
So you can ask a boneyard if you don't have a plate and you want to get one for your twin so that you can clear your windscreen. It's possible to call boneyards and ask if they've got an Aztec or a Seneca plate, because those will be able to be installed on the twin Comanches.
Yeah, but even those are just a small little area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it gets the job done. It's not the best, but it's better than trying to rely on your defrosters. Let me put it that way.
You're right. It has to be.
This is Ray. I got a 12-volt hand-operated hairdryer, and I put that behind the seat. And I plug that in an emergency.
Cool. I had no idea you could run a hairdryer off 12 volts. That's super cool.
Yeah, 12. You had to get a 12-volt, hairdryer.
Okay.
Make those for RVs.
That's a good one.
Kristin, I was interested in that hot plate. Was that one of those rare twin Comanches that came out with boots and all that stuff, or did you just put that on as an add-on emergency kind of thing?
I don't think the airplane came out of the factory with any of it. I'd have to go back through the 337s. I think a year or so after it came out of the factory, somebody put the alcohol props on it. And then a little bit later, somebody put the hot plate on it. And then the previous owner, who was based in Watertown, New York, in '92, decided he needed to have boots. And he put the boots on.
Oh, okay. So kind of built it up then.
Yeah, it was.
But all that stuff operational still, or?
Yep.
Oh, cool. There you go.
And back to
buys-
questions.
It buys you a little more time.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want anybody to think they could put that plate on their airplane and declare themselves equipped for icing conditions.
No.
Yeah.
It's one of the lesser important things that I have on the airplane. You know, in terms of, but it really only helps you the last 6 inches of the flight, but it is pretty helpful in those last 6 inches.
Any port in a storm.
This is great. So now we got plates and pluggable hair dryers. These are things that are now in my go bag. So just a couple of quick comments. If you've got anything in your hangar or airplane that's used for heating, make sure it's on a GFCI. Tim commented maybe we need to do a different color wing walk so we don't have our right hand tanks dry out and be replaced more often than our left hands. Might look cool. Just some reinforcement of the whole idea that we need GFCIs. Most hangars are old and don't have GFI protection, and for 10 to 20 bucks, you can protect all the receptacles in your hangar if you can get the first one in line protected with a GFI. And since most hangars are on ground/concrete, this is a great way to survive any faulty electrical equipment and cords. And suggest that even if you have to replace all your receptacles with GFI types, you're likely to be able to do so for less than $100 USD. Any comments from those who have seen hangar fires about whether that'll offset some of the fires that we've been seeing with people leaving pluggable devices on in their hangars?
Well, even if you have a nice little, like they call them golden rods, or the little deals you get from West Marine, it's not so much the heat that the thing's putting out, but if there's an arc and a short, that GFI will pick it up right away. I mean, milliseconds, and maybe save your airplane or whatever you got that you're warming up.
All right, I'm going to zip through these. In regards to priming, this was Brian Wilson had a real interesting input. He said he did a test for his 61-250 carbureted. It takes 3 primer strokes before fuel even reaches the cylinders. So I prime minimum of 4 to 5 for a normal day, and not sure how many prime strokes are needed in freezing temperatures because he's in Florida. Any comments?
I think he needs to clean out his primer lines. They do get restricted over time.
Okay. So that's something like, would that be an emergency thing or just something to do at the next annual?
Yeah, do it the next annual.
Cool.
Because each time you pump, you should get something through the lines. And
so it should say each stroke should reach the cylinders.
Yeah. And I think on the 250, we've got 5 cylinders connected to prime line.
Yep.
Now, there's probably only 1 or 2 cylinders that you're putting fuel in that's going to be used properly based on the position of the, what stroke you're in. And I brought up that I was told one time to do a pump of your prime and then run the engine a full revolution, pump again, run the engine a full revolution, and pump a 3rd time. And if you do that, you have a chance of getting fuel into most of the 5 cylinders.
And thus you're going to have a better cold start with.
If you're not you're out in the cold and it's 0 degrees and you haven't been able to preheat.
For those times you're stuck in a small airport without power and you're coming back to a cold airplane.
Yeah. Now, I know Zach said not to use accelerator pump.
Unless you're cranking the engine.
Yeah. Well, I pump and then crank, but I've been doing that since 1986. And it's a difference between a thing cranking over 3 or 4 times or cranking one blade and starting.
Well, another thing you can do to get a richer mixture in there is to leave the primer unlocked, and it will draw fuel through the priming system as you're cranking.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kristin.
That's true.
In fact, if you forget to lock it or you don't lock it when you fly, you'll find that out too. You'll run way too rich.
But Kristin, is what you're saying that rather than pumping the accelerator, which Zach points out, if you're doing that without cranking, risks an induction fire. You're saying if you leave the primer unlocked, then it'll draw fuel through as you're cranking.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
And if you do,
I don't usually start with that. I mean, normally, I would start with 5 or 6 shots of prime, a couple of quick strokes of the throttle, milliseconds before I hit the starter.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't seem to be getting it, and it's just not getting, it's kind of spitting, and then you have to and you're not quite getting enough fuel in there, and it spits a few times like it's trying to catch, but then you have to stop and reprime. After the second time I've reprimed and I couldn't get it going, then that's when I would try leaving the primer unlocked and see if that made a difference.
Cool.
Kristin, I have a question for you. It's an easy one, I think. If I take my twin Comanche somewhere and it gets really, really cold, having a pretty minimum cold weather experience, is there any special start procedure I should use besides just the standard cold start procedure with the fuel injection and the little dance we do with the throttle and the mixture?
No, probably just a little bit longer on the prime, and then typically you get to know your airplane after a while, and how much prime it wants in different conditions. And
Right.
instead of maybe a normal 3-second prime, it maybe get a 10 or a 7-8 second, little bit longer prime. Again, crack the throttle a little bit, and as I'm cranking, if it's not responding to that, then I'll slide the mixture up a little bit and see if that makes it happy.
Okay. Okay. And when you crank, you leave your fuel pumps on or do you turn them off?
In real cold, I probably leave them on. Usually in normal, ambient shirt sleeve weather, I turn them off.
Yeah, okay. That's what I figured. I just wondered because I didn't quite know what to do with them when I first bought them.
Some of the checklists and some of the manuals say to, turn it on and leave it on, and others say just use it to prime. And I've done both. When you pull the mixture back, it'll cut off. You're not getting any fuel in there anyway. So, whether you're running it or not. When I first started flying Lycoming injected engines, I think I left it running all the time. And then I bought an airplane and had to buy new pumps. I'm a little bit slower, a little bit more inclined to turn the thing off after I've primed it.
Yeah, that's a factor with those pumps. Yeah, okay, thanks. I just wondered if there was any special ooga booga I had to do, or if it was like, 20 below when I went out there or something. Just give it a little more gas, I guess.
At 20 below, you're going to preheat it.
Oh, okay. Well,
20
what's that?
below, 20 below, don't even think about trying to. I mean, Lycoming says to preheat below 20 degrees. I'm kind of preheat below 32, but then I have to buy the engine if I kill it. So
That's true. So do I. Okay, thank you.
Just a quick comment, the tail stall recovery is the opposite of all of our other stall training. That's in response to the comment about ice on the tail causing a tail stall.
Well, when I had
Just
go
ahead.
my empennage, I didn't have any time to really study how I got the thing flying again, but I can't speak one way or the other on that.
You just found out that flying it downwards worked better for that 414 that you were running into trouble.
I would oscillate around a little bit, and then when the oscillations got a little too severe, because I was trying to be real miserly with my altitude, I would just let the airplane descend at a couple hundred feet per minute. For some reason, it would stabilize, and I could get some control back, and then as I leveled off again, I'd get some time on it, and it would start this fugoid oscillation type of thing, and just kept working it, hoping I didn't run into a rock on my way to Reno.
Well, you know what? So Dr. Bonham actually pasted into the chat window, and this, for those who are on by phone, this will be part of the chat when the recording is put up on the Zooms area. There's a NASA tailplane icing video, and the recovery technique starts at 17 minutes to 23 minutes and 21 seconds. So thank you for posting that in there. So if you go to the chat window about a little more than halfway down, you can see the link, and you can actually click right through, or you can copy that and save it to watch the NASA tailplane icing video and the recovery technique. Not that we should ever have to use it, but one more tool for the tool bag. A comment that perhaps one advantage of a black or painted leading edge of the wing might be visibility of ice accumulation. Any comments from Kristin or Ron? Would it be easier to see on a dark or non-white leading edge?
Well, I use the same thing that Zach uses. The air temperature probe that sticks out of the windshield is easy to see, and then I have sea lights also out on the end of my wings. So even if it's dark, you can see, because they're lit up, the ice form on those. I don't know.
And sea lights, everybody, are those clear plexiglass thingies that a lot of Comanches have screwed in between the nav light, bubble dome, and the wing.
Yeah, Zach had a good picture of that on his. And I want to make a comment about icing, because we've talked a lot about icing, and I'd like to hear Kristin weigh in on this. In the Great Lakes area, there's a lot of ice. I'd say 90% of my flights, I pick up zero ice. When I do pick up ice, it's pretty much a trace, either going up through a 1,000-foot layer or coming back down through a 1,000-foot layer to an approach to land. I mean, we don't go around in the Great Lakes flying in ice all the time. And that picture that I sent you, CJ, yesterday, that I think you posted, I mean, that was a 30-minute flight, and that's all it picked up in 30 minutes. And that was, and probably that's, from the looks of it, it was a little bit of, it wasn't just rime, it was a little bit of mix, but it was mostly rime. But anyway, I just want to make sure that people know we don't take off and try to fly in ice. In fact, the opposite. We try to plan to not fly in any ice. There are times like these gray days that last for weeks and weeks that you do go up through a small layer to get on top. But most of the time you don't pick up any. If you do, it's a trace. So I don't know, Kristin, what's your feeling about that?
Well, Midwest Great Lakes, icing, 95+% of it is through a fairly thin layer. And, most of the time you pick up almost nothing. Coming back from California about 10 days ago, interesting flight, and the conventional wisdom is you can't fly across the Rockies in the wintertime. I flew out to California VFR, never got in a cloud, flew back from California and only found clouds about 30 miles, starting about 30 miles west of my destination airport. And it was sufficiently low that I needed to pick up a clearance to shoot the approach. And I went into the clouds at 2,700 feet. I came out of them at about 1,900 feet. So I was in them for less than a minute. Landed the airplane, taxied and pushed it in the hangar, and then noticed I'd picked up about 1/8 of an inch ice. But I didn't know it.
Yeah.
It didn't. It didn't stick at all to the windscreen.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, it was just too smooth a transition of the air to pick any of it up. But it was a little bit on the leading edge and a little bit. That's the kind of ice that 90+% experiences that I've had, have been a trace, or very light ice that I really didn't even have to do anything in particular about, other than noting it was there. And, probably, of the remaining 5%, 4% was, oh, well, yeah, I think I'll keep up a little more speed on the approach and I think I'll leave my flaps up, kind of thing. And about 1% of my encounters do I have a story about. Maybe less than 1%.
Yeah. I think my experience pretty much parallels yours. The other comment that I can make, and I think you may have been in a different situation, I don't have to fly. I mean, most of my flights, I do Wings of Mercy and Angel flights and stuff like that, and we have contingencies for weather. But most of my flights, I don't have to go. And if something is telling me, you got to fly, you got to fly, you got to fly, that's a big flag to me to say, okay, I don't think I'm going to go. Or if I believe this thing that's trying to push me, because I push back at stuff that pushes me. And if it's pushing me hard enough, I'll just push back and say, hey, we'll go at a different time or a different day, because I don't have to fly today. And so I think most of us are in that situation where you really don't have to fly when everything isn't right. If something looks bad, that's only the beginning of the chain. There's going to be 2 or 3 things to follow that. Mm-hmm. And I do have, freezing rain is one thing I will, and summer storms that have hail either.
Well, there's no point damaging your airplane with hailstorms.
Right. So, there's a few things that I just don't fly. And if it's freezing rain or there's moisture in the air and the ground is below freezing, and of course it's below freezing, there's no inversion layers as you get up higher. I'm not going to go that day or that time period. It may get better in the afternoon, or the morning might be better than the evening or whatever. But You know, you can make those changes. I,
I have a question for Kristin. Obviously, the aim of it is never to end up in this situation, but if through poor airmanship or poor decision making, you end up trapped on top of a freezing layer or anything like that, what is your advice on at least getting down safely?
Well, a little bit depends on whether you've got warm air underneath. But you know, I've had any number of times where, you know, I might be up at 6,000 feet and the controller wants to move me down to 3,000 to vector me for the approach. And I'm like on top at 6, and I'm pretty sure there's some ice down below. You know, nah, I ain't going down until I absolutely have to. Basically, until I intercept the glide path with
So
a
your advice-
runway at the end of it. So I'm not going to let them vector me around in the ice. And so I'm going to minimize my, and this is true whether I'm trapped up there, you know, I mean, most of the times I've had that is, you know, it wasn't necessarily unexpected that there'd be ice there. But, you know, I have a lot of experience that nobody really needs to go and get, you know, unless you happen to be young, flying for a living and trying to prove your way in the world. And so, you know, I got to experience some things, you know, when I was in my 20s and too stupid not to, that I wouldn't do today. I mean, part of me is glad I had the experience because I lived through it, but, you know, in the cold,
Some
hard
people
light
aren't so lucky.
cold, hard light of things, you know, that there was some, you know, there was some experiences where probably the risk factor would be unacceptable to me today, and it was acceptable to me in my 20s.
Mm.
You know, but that's one of the hazards of flying for a living.
What I just wanted to confirm, so your advice for if trapped on top for any reason is stay clear of ice until you absolutely have to, and then basically try and go straight into wherever you're going. Ensure you've got warm air under that icing layer to, you know, make sure you can get that safest descent out of the ice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't linger in the ice. You know, so whatever I try to do and whatever I try to plan, and I'll give you an example if you'll forgive an old war story. I was coming out of an airport north of O'Hare called Palwaukee, or now they call it Chicago Executive or something. And I was heading up into Upper Michigan, and it was a filthy day. It was snowing, but I knew the tops and everything were about 8,000 feet, and I got, you know, so I loaded up my passengers, taxied out, got clearance to take off. And I was starting to pick up ice before I got the landing gear coming up. And I was cleared to 3,000 direct to the Northbrook VOR. And then, you know, as filed, you know, so pretty much just before I'd gotten 1,000 feet, you know, I was already popping the boots, and the tower tells me to contact departure. And so, you know, I called Chicago departure, Navo 22 Alpha uniform, you know, out of 2,000 for 3, looking for higher. And he says, maintain 3,000. You know, so I climbed to 3, popped the boots, look at the accumulation rate, and says, this is going to be a no-go. And so I go back to him and, you know, say, you know, departure 22 Alpha uniform, 3,000, level of 3, picking up ice, need higher, I'll take a vector. And he says, Roger, turn left 20 degrees, climb and maintain 9er. And, you know, up I went and broke out on top. But the whole point is minimize your exposure. Have a plan that does not involve constant flying in the ice. And you know, the reverse of that would have been, you know, I would have been sitting up at a much higher altitude until I basically cleared for the approach. And so when I start down, I can go all the way to the runway.
You know, Chris, that was a really good illustration. I just having a talk with one of my pilot buddies, and the conclusion of the talk was when you're talking to air traffic controllers, most of them are popping and dropping jets and, you know, turboprops and all this stuff. And sometimes you run into controllers that have no real good feeling for the limitations we have in our airplanes. And I think that was probably just about perfect, your call on that, because not only did you say, hey, I can't do this, and you also said, you know, I'll accept a vector. So basically, Kristin was acting like her own air traffic controller, because her next resort would be unable, I'm declaring an emergency, you know, and here's what I'm going to do, and you work around me.
Well, and she also
you were right on the
mad
of that.
She also gave him the magic words, I'm picking up ice.
Right.
Which
he doesn't want my bodies on his conscience.
Right. Just a couple of weeks ago, I'll tell a war story too, although not much of one. You know, we went to the event down at Lakeland with the other Comanches, and we ended up flying up to Panama City to visit with an old instructor of mine, and then nonstop from there up to Lapeer, Michigan. And there was, you know, ForeFlight now tells you where the icing is, which is nice, and tells you where the tops are and where the, you know, where the cloud layers are. So I planned for 11,000. I knew I was going to pick up a little bit at Lakeland climbing up to that, but not much. At 11,000, I was on top of everything till I got to Columbus, Ohio. Now, Columbus, Ohio, and I don't know if you flew around Ohio much, Kristin, but they call it Storm Alley, south of Lake Erie there. And it's never what it's forecast. Anyway, at 11,000, the clouds started coming up and kissing my plane. So I went up to 12. And then about 20, 25 minutes later, they came up some more. So then I start requesting lower. I go down to 9 and 7 and down, I think I finally went down to 5. At 5, I was in a layer. So then all the way past Detroit up towards Lapeer at 5. Then he wants me to get down to 4. Well, I see the clouds below me. ForeFlight's telling me that between 3 and 4 is where the ice is, but if I can get down to 3 or below, I'm okay. So just like Kristin, I told him, I said, I want to stay at 5 until I'm cleared and on the approach, because I need to get down to 3. I can't stop at 4. And what used to be Flint approach is now Great Lakes approach. They allowed me to do that, took me down to 3. I was just below the clouds at 3 in the clear. And it was a non-event going in land, and I picked up a trace going down through the clouds there, but not enough to affect me or the plane.
Yeah, well, that's a good example of, you know, hunting around for something. You know, you can do that in areas where it's layered. You know, where icing can get really tricky and problematic is, you know, someplace like, you know, the Sierras with or the Cascades up in Washington, where you've got, you know, a nice moist westerly flow that, you know, will push supercooled, you know, large droplets up into your altitude. You know, and then things happen really quickly. And I really tend to try to stay out of those kind of conditions. If I've got equipment that I can get up to 25,000 or something, then I can get to where it's too cold for large supercooled droplets to get to. But I'm not going to try to punch through on the MEA. You know, even with my de-iced twin Comanche, I'm going to wait till I can go, you know, VFR through the passes or something else. But when you're out in the Midwest and you've got layers, you know, because you have essentially stable air. You don't have significantly unstable air. That's exactly what you do. You keep looking for, you know, change altitude and find a good space and hang out there for as long as you can, as long as that space is good for you. And when it ceases to be, change it again. Because usually you can find, you know, a layer.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's great summation.
Yep. So this is my father flew a lot of hard IFR, and that was what he did. It was find a layer, talk to ATC. They're happy to try to help you stay in clear air, and they'll help you real quick, work with you if you need to change it. So let's see, just a couple of questions. Where does ice first start to build up on twins, which don't have a temperature probe? Gear mirror, bottom of windshield, and Pat Kiefer commented all the leaching edges, including the spinner tip.
So sometimes the corners of the windscreen will give it to you first. I mean, I have a digital probe too, but I left the OAT in there for exactly that reason. Is because I wanted something to look at, you know, to be able to look at the ice. So, you know, beyond the corners of the windscreen, probably the wing or the spinner. Sometimes you can also see it around the on the inboard side of the cowling inlet. You can sometimes see it build there.
So for twin drivers, that's helpful to know where to look. Just a quick comment from CJ. I just happened to have been flying quite a few different Comanches recently in situations where, you know, where there was a possibility of ice. And what I noticed, this is over the last 2 years, is 2 Comanches with temperature gauges through the windscreen, or one coming through the fuselage just above the windscreen. The temperature gauge is going through the windscreen. That picked up ice beautifully. The one up above, I saw ice on the wing before I saw it on the digital thermometer. And then those without, depending on how your windscreen is set on, you may or may not get ice down on the outside bottom edges of the windscreen. I was surprised, but they were not all the same. And it could be that the type of ice was different. I don't know what. Just, I was surprised to see the different Comanches were showing their ice differently.
It can really depend on conditions and your airspeed and other things as well as to where it will show up first. The OAT on my airplane, you know, stuck up in the corner of the windscreen, is pretty reliable.
Helpful to know that it depends on conditions and type of ice and airspeed.
Yeah, I mean,
because we're all told to look in this particular place, but if those can affect it, then we'll know to be alert for not just that one place, but look everywhere.
CJ,
yeah, and those kind of conditions, looking around is a good idea.
CJ, you want to kind of tie this into a knot and so we can get off of the recording?
Yes, absolutely. Let's see, quick question. So just a quick comment from Pat Kiefer that the digital temp gauge, Kristin just mentioned, she's got both her digital temperature gauge and her thermometer probe. And Pat just mentions 1 degree can make quite a difference. So having a digital temperature gauge is really handy. George Gretton asked, lights on or off in icing? Kristin and Ron, just real quick.
Lights?
I'm assuming he means nav lights, perhaps, or
well,
maybe.
I mean, if you're at night, you need lav lights on. I'm not. You know, the only thing different I guess I would do with lights is the, you know, in the clouds at night, the strobes are kind of a bad idea. Though if you're in snow, it's pretty cool to turn them on, you know, and look at it for a few seconds before you turn it back off again. Because it's pretty freaking amazing when that strobe pops and there's like a bazillion snowflakes frozen, you know, for an instant. You know, the first time you look at that, you know, it really kind of
The
blows.
Star Wars
I
effect.
experienced that for the first time flying a Cirrus at night in sort of very fine rain, coming home to Dunkerswell after a day's work, and it was pretty amazing seeing the every time it flashed up, it felt like you were going, you know, warp speed in Star Wars or something like that.
Yeah, it's even more amazing
I'm
when
gonna forget that.
even more amazing when it's snow and not rain, but rain gives you kind of the same effect.
Well, it's Britain. We get 1 day of snow a year. So rain's all we get.
Yep. There were some comments about flying in icing conditions in the Comanche, and the comments just, you know, emphasize that we don't plan to fly if we know there's icing. We stay on the ground. These are if, despite all your planning, you get into ice.
I'm not saying that.
Say again?
I said I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I'm not
No.
either.
So,
Okay.
you know, I mean, it, you know, I mean, I don't know where that's coming from, but the reality is if you like live in Minnesota, you know, fly around the Great Lakes, the only month I've never put ice on is July. So I'm basically parking the airplane for 11 months, which is not why I bought the plane.
Well said.
And if you go with forecasts, this time of the year, it's always forecast to be icing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, and I think both Kristin and I had similar experiences where 90+% of our flights, we don't get any ice, or if we do, it's just a trace. And yet, you know, we start out in overcast area, we climb through it, we get in the sunshine at, I mean, when you get into January, you're in the sunshine at 4,500 feet, and you fly your flight in the sunshine and you come down and land. And most of the time, you don't get any, and if you do, it's just a trace. But that's winter flying in the Great Lakes area.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, you know, that's just a reality. I mean, you have to, you know, you either have to decide that you're going to learn how to deal with this and use your airplane. You're going to move to Key West, or you're going to sell the plane.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that sounds cavalier, but, you know, it's like, you know, up in this area, it's like saying, well, you know, driving in the snow is dangerous, so I'm not going to drive if there's any snow on the ground, you know, which basically means I'm non-functional for half of the year
here.
Which kind of is about the way we are here with the, you know, with the pandemic and whatnot, but you know.
Right. And flying out of New England, it's, you know, as Pete and I can, and actually quite a few of the people here know, you know, it's this, we have winter here, 7 months of the year, Vermont has winter, and we're in it now. So,
yeah.
How do you
just a lot of thank yous and a request for a second session for part 2. One I want to just read in particular, just one of the best topics we could host, fantastic guest speakers and an infinite amount of wisdom and advice. Great information to have. Thank you. And that's one of many just thank yous. Kristin and Ron and Zach had to come off, but
I think the topics we discussed tonight might genuinely save someone's life one day.
could do.
Well,
I think
Marty said,
I think it's more likely that a whole bunch of people just think I'm crazy, but that's okay.
I hope
I know there were so
We're
many
all
people
crazy.
who
We're sat in a Zoom meeting in our evening talking about airplanes.
I hope if nothing else,
It's-
if people do a lot of pre-flight planning and do a lot to prep your plane for for this kind of stuff based on these discussions. And CJ, next time we have a discussion, if we have some time, I'll tell my war story of my one and only 0-0 landing.
We are having a part 2. We have a whole bunch of topic material that we didn't touch. We'll have to find out when. I just want to thank Kristin in particular has a killer schedule, and Kristin, and Ron, and I wish Zach were still here. This information was amazing. The amount of time you gave us was wonderful. We're so grateful. Everybody, this is recorded. We'll probably most likely have it up tomorrow. We may just check to see if there's any clarification that needs to be made. And we'll be in touch about when phase 2 will be scheduled, most likely sometime in January if Kristin and Zach and Ron can make that time available.
What's phase 2?
We actually stopped this. We had all this topic material planned and all this this document, and we just stopped on icing because it was such a topic for everybody to really try to drill down into. And so phase 2 would just be to come back and discuss the rest of this whole part of the rest of the material.
Because icing's kind of the boogeyman of aviation. Of light airplanes.
Paul Harvey comment of the year, the rest of the story. And then I want to mention too, yes, this will be recorded. In fact, it is recorded. It will be on the website probably tomorrow morning. And next week being Merry Christmas Eve, we are not going to have an official ComancheZOOM, but we will be up for an open mic session. So we can carry on to other discussions at that time.
The descent procedures, by the way, that were written into this document, the document will be posted with the recording on northeastcomanche.org under the ComancheZOOM section. And so so people can download that and write on it and edit it. We will not be posting it right away until we can run it by the people who were speaking, because I probably made typos. I was trying to listen and type and talk, and I never do anything multitasking very well.
Let me clarify that
it'll be there
real
at
quick.
some point.
Let me clarify that real quick. What happens is I will go home and compile this thing and put it up onto the website the server that we have available. I then create a page, a PDF page with the links to the video. And I will also include a link to this document that CJ is talking about, but it will be on our Northeast website. It'll not be on the one with the rest of the recordings.
Pete, can we put it both in the documents, general documents area, but also with this recording?
Yes, we can.
Both
I've had
locations?
trouble,
'Cause I think
I've had
that'll-
trouble
okay.
downloading anything except videos. They don't open. You can
Oh,
you can
okay.
download it, but you can't look at it.
Got it. We'll take it offline and figure it out.
Yep. But it,
All
yes,
right,
it will be available. It will be available.
The only thing, I'm sorry about picking and choosing people's comments and questions. The only thing I did want to add in while we've got people here, at a recent FAA webinar, a freight pilot said he'd had very good results removing frost by putting hot water in a large garbage bag, tying it shut, and laying it on the wing. Apparently melts frost fast, and then move it or roll it along the wing. Said he could defrost the airplane in minutes. Of course, you need a source of hot water. Thank you, everybody. Kristin, Ron, thank you so much. Your years of experience, your flying in these kinds of conditions benefit the rest of us. And thank you, everybody who contributed your wisdom and your questions.
Okay, with that, the recording is done.